via live stream on Facebook. The public, for public hearings, can be here in person or by telephonic communication in accordance with instructions sent to persons who have registered with the town clerk no later than 3 p.m. Today. The public may also submit comments by email to the town clerk. Emailed comments received no later than 3 p.m. on May 3rd will be included in the record of the meeting, and the town clerk's email is jpierson@huntersville.org. Also, tonight is the first time we're going to be using our new public hearing, public comment procedures. So each person will be allowed 3 minutes, but you can designate a spokesperson for a maximum of 9 minutes. Those people that designate must still be in attendance when they do that. The presenting or petitioners will be limited to 15 minutes, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I see there are a lot of people that have signed up for one particular public hearing, so just to give you a heads up, I'll cut that down to 2 minutes because we have a lot on our agenda tonight. 2 minutes for each person, or 9 minutes for somebody representing more than 3. We called the meeting to order, and we start our meetings with a moment of silence. Thank you. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Once again, thank you all for coming. I want to give a shout out to our Huntersville 101 graduates. Do we have anybody here? Can you please stand? I'll give you a little, yeah. So for those that don't know, Huntersville 101 is one of the things the town offers to, I think we had 18 people, including 2 staffers, do that. They go around, visit various, go to the police station, fire station, talk with planning and park and rec, and probably know as much or if not more than about 99% of our citizens now. So I would encourage you, if you have not done that, to take part. We even had somebody who lived here for, I believe, 34 years. And she emailed us and said what a great time it was and how much she learned about Huntersville. So, also, I would like to give a shout out to all those who participated in the Mayor's Fitness Challenge. That was a competition between Huntersville, Davidson, Cornelius, and Mooresville. Huntersville took 3rd place, but we had a stellar showing from one of our commissioners, Commissioner Dan Boone. I think you won every week, so congratulations.
Thank you, John.
Yep, and I just want you all to know your mayor combined total of minutes more than the other 3 mayors combined. So I don't know, they got a lot of work ahead of them. But Davidson won, but I want to give a special thank you to Lindsay Small. She coordinated that, and she did a great job. She kind of kept track of all the minutes and all the things that people were doing, giving out emails and so forth. And then speaking about the other mayors, my mayor's lunch on May 18th will be at spare time, 11:45 to 1 o'clock, and Mayors Knox and Mayor Washam will be my guests. So we'll talk about stuff that's going on in the region and learn a little bit more about what's going on within each of those towns. And then finally, last week, I attended the Metropolitan Transit Commission. Two big takeaways. One, Hambright Road Park and Ride. That's moving along at, I'd say, government's pace, glacially, but that is still going forward. We did vote on the budget, and I was one of 2 who did not vote for the budget, and my reasoning for that is, you know, we've talked a little bit about the 1% sales tax for additional transit options throughout Mecklenburg County. The board has come out against that. And I asked the question to Mayor Lyles, where's that 1% sales tax discussion? And basically it's not. So we don't have a funding source for any of the additional lines that are proposed at this time. The main line is the silver line, which is intended to go from Matthews all the way to maybe Gaston County. However, within that budget, there's still $20 million to continue studying that. And I didn't feel like if you don't have a funding source, you should continue to spend $20 million of our taxpayer dollars when we can spend that $20 million on many other things like sidewalks, greenways, and so forth. In addition, once the board was going to vote after the budget to have a locally preferred alignment. So this would be a line, not so much in the sand, almost in the cement, of where you would like this silver line to go. And if you don't have a funding source and you're going to put a line on a map that may go through people's homes, businesses, and affect their property values, I don't think that's fair. So myself and Mint Hill representative voted against that budget, and then I was the only one voting against the silver line alignment. But I did want to at least explain my rationale. I think too often government goes ahead, has these plans, but don't have a way to fund it, and it negatively affects the citizens. So that's all I have. Commissioner Munger?
Somehow I knew you would start off in a different direction. But thank you, Mayor. I had the opportunity to attend Hello Huntersville this weekend, which was well attended, and fortunately we had some really wonderful weather for the event. Later this week, I will be attending the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board meeting, and then next week on May 12th, I will be attending the Centralina Regional Council Board of Delegates meeting, where amongst other items, we will be discussing the FY 2022 work planning session. And as always, if you have an opportunity to give, please consider supporting our nonprofits such as Angels and Sparrows, Caterpillar Ministries, Bags of Hope, and Ada Jenkins. And back to you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Phillips?
This is weird. Last Wednesday, we had the second dose COVID vaccine event in Huntersville at the Waymer Center in historic Pottstown. 324 people received their second dose of the vaccine, including myself, some people in the audience as well. Thank you guys for coming out. Also, at this time, we had 28 people utilize the in-home visits the county's doing for vaccines for those that are homebound. If you need someone to come out and provide your vaccine at home, you can go on the county's website, or if it's easier, just reach out to me and I'll connect you. And then on April 24th, I had the honor of speaking virtually with Unity and Community at their quarterly meeting. The topic was affordable housing in our communities, and I was the representative for Huntersville. I learned a great deal listening to Wayne Herron, Deputy Town Manager of Cornelius, and Eugene Bradley, Davidson's Housing and Equity Director, and what their towns are doing. In the future, I see a lot of potential to grow, even though we're doing well together, to see what we can do about affordable housing, not just in Huntersville, but in the Lake Norman community. And last but not least, I was offered and accepted a board position with Rural Hill, and I'm looking forward to seeing how I can help this historic piece of property keep up for future generations, and how we can grow as a community to preserve our history. And that's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you. How are you feeling after your shot?
I felt fine. My arm was a little sore. I even filmed my shot and put it on social media so other people could see it wasn't as bad off as, you know, the media likes to make stuff. So,
Good.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner Walsh.
We ready, Bobby? So from Parks and Rec, got a little video here. Events started picking up here in Huntersville yesterday with the Hello Huntersville Arts and Music Festival at Veterans Park. It did attract a big crowd, and Brooks and Dixon were the band from Greenville, South Carolina. In fact, there were people camped out kind of before the stage, and kids running around, and it was just it was fun to see people back out. As you can see, they weren't required to wear masks, having a great time. Starting next Saturday and running through August, the Huntersville Growers Market will also be at Veterans Park from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And also next Saturday is the Cars carb and coffee event. Shop the market, enjoy coffee and breakfast as you stroll around checking out classic cars, trucks, rat rods, hot rods, muscle cars, and street rods, etc. From the Public Art Commission, they will be having their monthly meeting next Wednesday, May 12th, starting at 6:30 p.m., and that meeting will happen remotely, and of course, information can be found on our website if you'd like to participate. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bales?
Caught me off guard. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Greatly appreciated. Wonderful to see people engaged in the process, and we thank you all for coming. Second, I want to say that during our pre-meeting, I did not wear my mask. There were just us sitting here. But now that you're here and you're joining us and you have to wear yours, I'm going to also be wearing mine when I'm just sitting here not speaking. Just letting you know that. In regards to my reports, our EDC projects, we have 40 projects happening in Lake Norman, and 27 of those are happening right here in Huntersville. And these are commercial projects, so we look forward to seeing new things happening in Huntersville as we continue to grow. And what a wonderful way to do that, by bringing new business to the area. Second, I'd like to share with you about the Education Collaborative. So far, we have worked, the Lake Norman Chamber and the EDC and Education Collaborative have been doing some planning sessions with our area high schools. And we're working with, we've already done one with Hopewell. We did this past week. We did one with Huff. And we will also be doing one with North Meck in addition to our local charter schools in the future, planning next year's projects and how we can infuse workforce development opportunities and educate students on all the opportunities that exist in our region and in Huntersville for opportunities for education around, I'm losing my words tonight, opportunities for employment for when those students graduate. So whether or not they ultimately go on to get a 2-year certification through CP or go on to a 4-year college, making sure that they have the tools necessary to be successful as they set up their futures in their hometowns, which is always a goal. In addition to that, I want to take a second and I would like to thank all of Parks and Rec. Michael J. Cox, thank you and your staff for Hello Huntersville. It was such a wonderful time to see people out and about and engaging, and it was interesting the conversations that it inspired, right? Running into someone you knew and they would say, I've had my vaccine. And I'm like, well, I've had mine too. So it was great to see you and engaging in folks that you haven't seen in a year. And that was just a wonderful opportunity to do that at Hello Huntersville. So thank you for that. And please pass that along to your team because they did an outstanding job. Also want to inform the board that during the City Vision conference with the League of Municipalities, I was nominated and elected to serve on the North Carolina League of Municipalities Board of Directors. So I will be representing District 8, and District 8 represents several counties in our region. So I look forward to doing that at the League. And hopefully we'll continue to advocate for things that are important to our community and to the Lake Norman region. And with that, Mr. Mayor, it is back to you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Boone?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. From the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce, Small Business Week will be celebrated by the Chamber on May 24th through the 28th. More details to follow. On May 5th of this week at 5:30, the Chamber will be holding a business mixer and after-hours networking event, and this will be hosted by Sam James's Funeral Home. From Public Safety, from the Huntersville Police Department, National Night Out is scheduled for Tuesday, August 3rd, at Veterans Park. Again, more details to follow. And Huntersville Citizens Police Academy will be held in this year of 2021, sometime in September or in October. If you've never taken this class, I'd highly recommend it. It's probably one of the most exciting things I've done since I retired. So finally, in July, the town board will be appointing 3 seats to the planning board and 4 seats to the Board of Adjustments. Those folks that just finished Huntersville 101, I'd like to ask you to please apply for those positions. The applications need to be received by the 31st of May, and you can get those applications on the town website. Again, I'd like to echo everybody's comments about Hello Huntersville. It was a great time. Park and Rec did a great job. Also, the Old Huntersville Historic Society had the old jail open during this event, and 75 people came by the old jail and signed the registry. One person came from as far as Rhode Island with his daughter. He was up in a soccer tournament at Wake Forest. He was flying out, and he's a history guy and concerned about the old jails and stuff, and he stopped by and said hello. Following that history report, in 1914, President Woodrow Wilson signed a bill designating the second Sunday in May as a legal holiday. It is to be called Mother's Day. I'd like to wish everybody a happy Mother's Day this Sunday. Mr. Mayor, that's my report.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Hines?
Well, thank you all for being here. I'll give you a CRTPO update. And CRTPO, which is Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, we use a lot of acronyms, and I don't remember any of them. So just want to give you kind of a quick update. We had our last meeting. I gave that update. Our next meeting is on May 19th. So what the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization does is a local MPO. The states have MPOs throughout the state. So when we talk about roads and we talk about priorities of those roads, the CRTPO is kind of the governing body about when money comes from the federal government down to the state, down to the MPO, then the CRTPO, the board, and even past boards, they prioritize what roads they want built first and those kind of things. In one of the president's last bills, there was a $1 billion grant program, and one of the things that we're trying to do as an MPO, which also means CRTPO, is we're trying to get some of that money. The state can get between $25 million and $100 million, and if we can get our hands on some of that, then we can help accelerate some of the road projects that were put on due to COVID. I'll give you this update since we have so many people in the audience, probably from the downtown area or definitely off Highway 73. So with COVID, COVID really hit NCDOT's bank account really, really hard. They have a cash floor policy, $365 million in the bank. Once you drop below that number, they have to cease all projects. I think it was March 13th or something like that, they hit that floor and they had to cease all projects. Projects such as Highway 73, such as a lot of the projects that we have on the books that are supposed to be built. Those of you on 73, like myself, we were going to be right-of-way acquisition in 2021, 2022, construction in 2023. Due to COVID and that, they stopped all work on that project, and they pushed back right-of-way acquisition in 24, 25, construction probably in 26 or 27. So what we're trying to do as a community, as a town, as your representative on CRTPO, any way that we can start seeing if we can get pots of money to help not on those state projects, but even local projects, start to accelerate some of those. That's some of the things we're working on. So there's a lot of pots of money out there. We're trying to see what we can do. But with Highway 73 being a state project, we don't have as much control over that as, say, Main Street project, which for those that live in the downtown area, we got the authorization to construct, and we're supposed to be starting that in a few months. So that will really help relieve a lot of the traffic downtown in Huntersville after we pull the Band-Aid off in a couple years of construction. So if you all have any other questions regarding transportation issues in your general area, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on the website. And Mr. Mayor, that's all I have.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. Well, speaking about money, Here we have a check presentation from the Greater Charlotte Auto Dealers Association. Come on up here. Mr. Jim Keffer from Keffer Automotive, Mr. Randy Marion from Randy Marion Automotive, Andrea Walton and Stacy Cohen from Huntersville Ford, Jen Jackson and Marissa Hamilton from the Greater Charlotte Automotive Dealers Association. And then who brought this to us, Mr. Rick Zorb, and then Chief Hoyle. Just as a little bit of background, I'm sure, Rick, you can give what is all going on here, but last year, probably the end of March, early April, when we went into our COVID restrictions in Mecklenburg County, we were much stricter than the rest of the state. And our Mecklenburg County restriction said auto dealers weren't essential. I don't believe you think that, right? So myself and Mayor Washam and working with the Dealers Association, we got them to be deemed essential, even though we know all businesses were essential. So, Officer Zorb, you want to give us a background, what's going on with these funds and where we are?
Sure. You hear me all right?
Yeah, get a little
right.
closer.
So we started this last year, maybe even 6 months before that, with donations from the Dealer Association. It is an emergency needs fund so that officers on duty can use these funds while on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when they get calls for services of all sorts. So domestic violence calls, they can separate the parties, maybe put one with children up at a hotel. We've done food and water and shelter. I think that the chief was going to speak a little bit to some of the uses we've had out there, but it's been great. I think this is the third, we were talking earlier, the third donation that they've done through the Dealers Association that has funded this whole project. So,
yeah, I want to correct one thing Officer Zorb said. This was his brainchild. He brought it to us, and he's been absolutely amazing. And you know, it comes from his frustration as a police officer. You'd be surprised some of the things these officers see when they go to calls. And he was very frustrated about, can't do this and can't do that. You know, how money gets segregated and we just can't go spend money like that. So we set up a fund that's regulated outside the police department, and the officers have access to it. I don't think our donors, I try to say this every time, just give you an update on a couple of cases, examples, because I don't think they realize how impactful this is. So what's really important about this is it's based on a calls for service usually. It's not like something somebody can apply for. It's when an officer goes out in the field, he sees something and he sees a need. He can go back and request money, and it can happen very quickly. So give you an example, we had a Latino family move in right before school started, single mom. She wound up in a couple days after moving here in the hospital with kids, no family, right before school. And we had some call generated that got us out there, got us aware of it, and the officers were able to go out and buy the kids some school clothes, make sure they had food when she got home, and things like that. We have had countless number of domestic violence situations where we utilize the funds to separate parties. We find a hotel room for one of the victims, when they get really heated, and the best thing to do is get them separated. Before it's routine for officers to say, you got anybody that can come get you? Now we can say, just come with us, we'll get you separated from it. So I could go on and on and on with examples. We keep a list, and we know it's amazing what we're able to do with this. And I'd just like to thank Officer Zorb, first of all, for coordinating all this for us and bringing the idea to us. And, of course, our donors, the Auto Association, has been so supportive. And without them, we just couldn't do it. And it's really a game changer for us. Thank you.
Ms. Jackson, you want to say anything, or?
I just want to thank Jim Keffer and Randy Marion and Huntersville Ford for being here this evening. They're representing all the dealers here in the Huntersville area. Thank you for having us. And on behalf of the Greater Charlotte Auto Dealers Association, it's our pleasure to present $10,000.
Wait, I have something for you, so you don't, now you know where you were today.
Absolutely.
And for $10,000?
10 cents for 10,000.
All right. We have one person who's signed up to speak in the public comments via phone. Sarah Coburn. Is Miss Coburn there? Mr. Davis, is Miss Coburn there or not? Technology. She's not there? Okay. All right. Any agenda changes?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one agenda change. We would like to move item 10B to 9D.
Okay. Any other? Have a motion, please?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the agenda as changed.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? All right. We'll move on from that. Any planning board members here tonight? Step up and introduce yourselves.
Frank Gammon, Planning Board.
All right, we'll open up, conduct a public hearing to receive public input on the North Point traffic calming. Mr. Trott, I'm sorry, Trott. Sorry. I think I've done that twice already.
That's okay. That's okay, I've been called worse. All right, good evening. So here tonight to talk a little bit about the traffic calming program and a request by the Lookout Point neighborhood for North Point Road. So we're going to talk about a little bit about the location, the process we're going through, the data so far, and a couple of potential physical solutions. So first off, where is North Point? North Point is on the north side of town, near the lake. A little more specifically, it's off of Terry Lane, north of Highway 73, which is to the east of Beatty's Ford Road and to the west of Catawba. This is the shot of North Point Road. As you can see, it's a unmarked local street in a neighborhood. And then another shot here, you can see it's from Google. You can see the Google truck there in the shadow, but again, just a local 2-lane unmarked street. So the HOA back in 2018 requested the study. And we put that in the queue, and then in early 2019 went out and took some speed data. Those data results showed that the 85th percentile speed was 34 miles per hour. What we're looking for when we collect the data is for a street that's posted 25 miles per hour is that 85th percentile, which is 85% of the vehicles are traveling that speed or less, is it 30 or lower? So if it's 30 or lower, then we say it looks good, no further action is needed at this time. In this case, it was 34 miles per hour, so it was above that threshold. So then it moves on to the next step. That next step being, we go out and put up the radar feedback signs, okay, that show people, let's make people aware of what's going on. We're seeing an issue, let's make people aware of what's going on. The police department's also been out there to do some enforcement. They go out there when they choose to do their part. We also ask that the neighborhood complete an awareness campaign. With that awareness campaign is unique to each neighborhood, but what we ask is documentation of 3 separate and different events or things that they do to get the word out. What we're trying to do is, let's get the word out, get people to slow down, and then hopefully that will resolve the issue. So over the next 18 to 24 months, the neighborhood completed those separate awareness campaign events. And then we went back and studied again. You know, did the awareness campaign and feedback signs and everything have a positive effect or not? What we found that, yes, it went down, but it was still over the threshold. And so the next step in the process is to come up with some physical solutions to help folks slow down, and then have a public hearing, which we're here tonight, to get some feedback from those residents. When the neighborhood does an awareness campaign, they're trying to reach out to everybody, but this is another way for folks to be able to voice their opinion on the project. So a couple of solutions that were developed are speed humps, and actually both of the options are speed hump options. The first option is a 4 speed hump option. Approximate spacing is about 500 feet. A second option is, again, speed humps, but at a little bit closer spacing. What we've seen is that when you have speed humps in that 300 to 500 foot range, that's kind of ideal. When you spread them out too far, people tend to speed up and then slow back down between the humps. So you've created a slower condition right at the speed hump, but you may not have really addressed the issue. And that's all I have. Can I answer any questions that you have?
Commissioner Walsh?
Mr. Trott, you may have said this, but when was the neighborhood awareness campaign done?
That would have been done between the first study and the second study. So the first study was completed back in early 2019, and the second study was completed in very early 2021. So the neighborhood, sometime between that time frame, had to complete and provide documentation for 3 separate awareness campaign events.
Okay, so we don't really know when it was done. And could you describe, if you know, what specifically the neighborhood did as a part of their awareness campaign?
I think they put it in a newsletter that goes out to the community. They also provide documentation of call it social media, getting the word out. And I think they put up and purchased some signs to put out so that when people drive by, they can see to slow down.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Hines?
So for the 3 separate awareness campaigns, do you get copies of those campaigns along with?
Yeah, we asked for documentation that was completed.
Okay, so are there other ways other than a newsletter, documentation? You said documentation, some other documentation, or like signs?
Yeah, social media.
Social media.
And then also they put up some signs. So we asked for documentation that they completed 3 separate and different ways to try to reach out to the community. It's kind of I guess the assumption in the policy is the HOA knows the best way to get in touch with the residents that are in their community. So we look for their direction in doing that. We just asked for documentation of 3 separate ways, 3 different and separate ways. So it wouldn't be posting 3 separate newsletters. That's the same way, even though it's 3 different times. We're looking for different ways that they're trying to reach out to the community.
So once you get that documentation, you check that box, you move on to the next step in the process.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bales?
Has there been anyone that sign up to speak on this particular topic?
Has there been anyone?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone.
Just asking. I would like to, before I ask any more questions, I'd like to hear from the public.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes. What was the thought process into only putting them on North Point and not the additional roads?
North Point was the street that was studied and requested to be studied. So we focus on just the streets that are requested.
Okay, and do you know how many homes are on North Point roughly?
I don't know exactly how many are on there. It is as you can see from the picture, there's only one way in and one way out.
I used to pet sit in there, I'm aware, yeah, I
Okay.
didn't know.
Okay. Commissioner Munger?
Yeah, you may or may not know this, but do you know if the HOA held a meeting specific to this topic?
No, I don't know if they held a specific meeting just to this topic, or if they talked about it in other meetings, or anything else that they did outside of that.
So just to piggyback off of that, newsletter, social media, signs, not necessarily a neighborhood meeting.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But they may have talked about it at a neighborhood meeting. We just asked for 3 separate. They can do more. They could do 100 if they wanted to.
Right.
But we asked for documentation of 3.
Okay. All right. If there are no other questions, Mr. Trott. I do want to acknowledge we did receive a few emails in the last 24 hours. You do have the ability to send additional emails that will be part of the record, but I did instruct and speak with the town clerk, and they'll be included in the minutes. Pamela Stanford, Judy and Sean Beatty, Ray Renshaw, Kathy and Harry Schrader, and Carrie Roop. So now we'll go into our public comments on this. And I'm going to call up Mike Kritzenberg, and he has Annette Duggan. Are you here, Miss Duggan? Okay. And Judy Beatty. Okay. So you actually have 9 minutes. Everybody else, you're going to get 2 minutes. Okay.
Okay, thank you. It's Mike Kreitzberg. I represent, I guess, the majority of the homeowners in our HOA association. I'm not on the board. But when we determined, I guess in the last couple of weeks, that this was coming before the town board, we kind of all got together and met in smaller groups. And I decided to kind of go around and do a poll in the community of as many people as I can get in touch with. And I think I sent you guys a copy of that today. Did you all get that? If not, I can give it to you. But in the past, when we've had issues in our community, whether it be about pool repairs or tennis court repairs or whatever, we've always met as a neighborhood meeting. And we've put things like that up to a vote to where everybody has the opportunity to voice their input and to decide whether or not, certain actions are appropriate in a neighborhood. And then at that point, we either decide to spend the money, or in this instance here, things can go forward with the town to get town input on that. In this instance, that has not happened. I don't know why. We just had one issue come up about replacing a tennis court, and that was put to a vote in the last couple of months. And so I don't know why this one really didn't come up as an issue, but I think it's important that everybody in the community at least has input. I think the speed studies are obvious, and I think everybody that I have gotten information from would say that, yes, we have a speeding problem in the neighborhood. Now, whether that's all the residents or whether that's the myriad of contractors that are coming into our community to do home renovations, I can't say. I have seen instances of neighbors, their teenagers speeding on the street. As I went around and talked to these people and got their input, I tried to indicate to those people to please get their kids or to please get themselves to slow down where possible. But I think, truthfully, the majority of the issue at this point in time is really the contractors' trucks as they come in early in the morning and they leave in the afternoon. Trash trucks, the myriad of Amazon trucks, all those are difficult at best for residents to control other than to try to tell them where possible. But our neighborhood, I guess, has been blessed over the years in that we have all done renovations to our houses. There's about 50 houses in the neighborhood, and I would dare say that just about every house in the neighborhood over the last few years has had significant renovations to it. So there have probably been more contractors in the neighborhood than residents themselves. And I think that's indicated on the speed study reports because it shows some 300 vehicles going back and forth on a given day, and there's really only 50 people in the neighborhood. So, that's double or triple the trips that you would assume if somebody was going out in the morning to go to work and coming back at the end of the day. But in any case, this poll here indicates the yellow are the ones that voted against the speed humps, and the green are the ones that voted for the speed humps. So there's 36 against and 8 for. What I would like to say is that this does not indicate that those that voted against the speed humps simply want to do nothing, because I think we have a problem. I just simply think that if we'd all had the chance to meet as a neighborhood, then perhaps we could have come up with different alternatives for how to solve our problem. I think in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of neighborhood awareness of this, obviously, and I would say that the speeding of the residents has gone significantly down. And I can't, again, speak for all the contractors, but I think everybody is now aware. But as to whether that would last for another 2 or 3 years if nothing was done, I can't say. So I think what we would all like to do is give ourselves the opportunity to meet as a neighborhood, discuss this, come up with alternatives, and then come back to you guys at some point in time and seek your help if some of these things could be better installed by the town versus us. The number of alternatives that have been discussed over and above speed humps has been to put up digital speed readers on the current stop signs in the community. I've talked to Mr. Trott about that, and I would agree with him that sometimes those readers work for a while and sometimes they don't after a while. But I think we would like to have the opportunity to at least consider that as an alternative. Other solutions that people have mentioned are putting 3-way stop signs at Weatherly and Leeward, which are the 2 spur roads that come off of North Point. That could be done in lieu of the speed humps and would certainly divide the segments of roads into 3 smaller sections, which I think would slow down traffic as well. There could be several other options in addition to that if we could all have the chance. The thing that I would say is that from a speed hump issue, if there's a place where we're really needing those, it's not necessarily on North Point, it's on the blind curve there on Terry Lane. There's trees that block that curve, and there have been a number of instances, I think, where people have swung wide as they're going in each direction on that and almost had collisions. So that's a very difficult area at best. Obviously, we have issues getting out of Terry Lane onto 73, but I don't think that's going to be decided anytime in the near future. I understand there's going to be a median put, and then there'll be restricting left turns, so that's in the years to come. But what I would like to do is try to solve issues for the entire area, not just North Point Road, but also for Terry Lane as well, because I think that is clearly a dangerous area there, and maybe a speed hump on either side of the curve would help there. But I think what I'm simply asking for is just give us the opportunity to meet as a neighborhood, come up with alternatives, come up with some discussion, try to come up with some kind of a group decision on what to do, realizing that we simply can't do nothing. We got to do something. We have to do something, because the last thing anybody in our neighborhood wants is for children to get hurt. And in the last few years, there have been a number of families that have moved into our neighborhood that do have small kids, and I think they are walked from their houses down to the pool and to the common area to use that. So the last thing we want to do is to get them hurt. But I think with walking kids on a road like this, there's a certain amount of responsibility that goes along with that. I know when I was a kid growing up in my neighborhood, we all played out in the street, and you learned really fast, who was the king of the road. It wasn't the public, it was the cars. And so I think that there needs to be some responsibility on the homeowner's part when they have kids out in the road, that they, one, be supervised that they be kept in kind of a small group as they're moving back and forth, and that they learn to watch out for cars. That's probably one of the most important things to learn as a kid, to watch out for cars. So with that, I'll simply say if you have any questions for me, I can answer those. If not, we can let others that want to speak on this issue get up here.
Thank you.
Okay?
All right, our next speaker is Mr. Bruce Anderson, and after him will be Andrew James. Good evening, Mr. Anderson. Please state your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Bruce Anderson, 16125 Weatherly Way. Traffic calming is best applied at the time of road construction. Later, the application of Band-Aids can fall badly short. Witness the experience of the town on Ransom Road. Installation of speed bumps resulted in the creation of short drag strips between the bumps. The predictable result, removal of the speed bumps. Note that both sections of North Point Road are about 1,500 feet long between the intersections. That meets the current Huntersville standard for street design for large lot subdivisions. The supposed traffic calming devices seem to be centered around the curve, which is also a natural calming design. Most of us in the neighborhood drive at a reasonable speed when the road is clear, and slow way down when there's pedestrian traffic and dogs in the road. Of course, as has been pointed out, there are outsiders and a few neighbors who speed. If that justifies a review, this decision should be based on input from the residents, not a small minority. If you want to make our community safer, you should know that the most dangerous time is on garbage pickup day. Many residents place their bins in the traffic lanes, and then of course the bins are dropped in the traffic lanes. That causes drivers to be distracted, to drive on the wrong side of the road, increasing risk to pedestrians, bicyclists, and other drivers. You alone can reduce this risk to lives by an ordinance requiring bins to be placed off the road. The next most dangerous practice, as the previous speaker mentioned, is parking in the blind curve on Terry Lane. I have heard that a car recently hit one of the trailers there. Your officers are nice. They just ask them to move. But that does not deter the practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. James, and up next, Ray Renshaw. Good evening, Mr. James. Please state your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Andrew James, 16225 Leeward Lane. Thank you to the commission and to town staff and Mr. Trott for your time. So I'm here to talk about my firsthand experience and then about some other relevant data that may not be on the page in front of you. My wife and I support traffic calming devices as a matter of safety for our kids. It's nobody's first choice. You're sure going to hear that tonight. But after many years, nothing else has worked. We've put out physical signs. I personally did on North Point Road. We had radar out. Police patrols have been out there. Personally, I'd be pleased with 3 humps instead of 4 or 5, but we're pleased with staff's recommendation. My family's lived in Lookout Point for over a decade. My wife's on the HOA board. I have 3 kids, ages 12, 9, and 5. Somebody in our family is out walking or biking North Point almost every single day. I can attest to countless firsthand experiences shepherding my kids over into somebody's yard when a car comes by and passes within 10 feet of us going 30 miles an hour. It's nerve-wracking, wondering every time if the driver sees you. We've heard plenty of challenges on social media to our parenting. It's because of watchful parenting and the grace of God that there hasn't been a catastrophe yet. Some pertinent facts: Lookout Point's a classic pedestrian neighborhood. There's no sidewalks anywhere, so everybody uses the road. Every neighborhood amenity, pool, common area, lakefront dock, basketball, tennis court, it's all on North Point Road, so it's going to get used. It's not an option not to walk there. Just a quick stat from Mecklenburg's Polaris I checked this afternoon. The traffic study that the town did had 2 data points. 1804, the worst of the 2. Within 600 feet of that traffic point is 5 households that have a combined 12 kids that are young or medium age, and 7 dogs that I see out walking regularly. So, and you'll hear from 3 of those households tonight. So it's a salient issue for me and my family and my neighbors. I respectfully ask you to approve some of the proposed speeding devices. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ray Renshaw, and then after that, Carrie Root. Good evening. Please state your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. Ray Renshaw, I live on 16023 North Point Road. I've lived there for 22 years. My wife and I, at the time when we bought the house, we were just engaged, and we've had 3 kids. 2 now are in college, and 1's still at the house. So I've lived right smack dab in the middle of where they're proposing these speed bumps for 22 years. Never once have we had an accident, an incident, or anything of that sort. No bike has been hit, no child, no dog. Just an occasional squirrel now and then, the poor little guys, and I make sure I give them a proper burial. But so raising the kids there, never did I feel threatened while I taught them how to ride the bike on the street. Every time a car went by us, they were respectful and moved along and slowed down. As Mike had mentioned, when no one's on the road, people do tend to speed a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't witness speeding on the street, and I'm a big advocate for slowing down and abiding by the law. I've been out blowing leaves and a car goes whizzing by me. I'll put my blower down. I'll walk up to the house wherever the individual that's working there or the homeowner, and I'll have a discussion with them and say, listen, you do not want to kill somebody on this street. I've had a slight altercation with one of the neighbors, and since then I've seen him drive by just about every day, 25 miles an hour. He waves to me, we're friends. So each time that I've witnessed it, I personally made it my point to go speak with them, and over time, over the last 22 years, it has improved. If you listen to the study that was done, there were 2 sensors put down, one in February of 19, or excuse me, 2 of them in February 19 and 2 of them in March of this year. The first 2 sensors in 18, both of them were over the 85th percentile that was discussed. This year, only one of them beat the 85%, and the other one was over by 2 miles an hour. So what does this say? We've made big improvements as a community. Thank goodness for the folks that are making this a conscious effort to make it presented to all the neighbors and all the contractors that come up through the neighborhood. We've made improvements over the span, and I truly believe that if we did another study in 6 months, neither of those sensors would, because my children who drive, we've sat them down and had serious conversations with them.
Our next speaker is Ms. Carrie Root.
They putz.
And after
Okay.
that,
Sorry.
will be Mona Dupree.
Thanks for your time.
Good evening. Please state your name and address, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Carrie Roop. I live at 16241 Leeward Lane. I want to thank you all for letting me come and speak to you tonight. Thank you for caring enough about our safety to be here. And again, thank you for the studies that were conducted in March of 2019 and 2021. As Mike said, we do have a significant issue, and these studies reflected it. As a mother of 2 young children who lives at the corner of North Point and Leeward, I'm very much in favor of these speed calming devices. As you can see, there are those that oppose these measures. Please consider when making your decision that many of those who oppose these humps and these speed monitoring devices are not routinely affected by the speeding that occurs through our community. Their homes are further off the road. They're further back of the neighborhood and do not intercept every single incoming vehicle through our streets. There are 2 blind turns, 2 blind hills that create visual distractions and visual challenges for pedestrians. We have already had 1 pedestrian who's fatally killed on Terry Lane, and I do not think it prudent that given these results, we wait for another incident like this to occur to make a change. I would like to say it's only contractors and drivers and delivery drivers who break the speed limit, but unfortunately that's not the case. I've personally tried to kindly chat with homeowners about their reckless speed habits, and I was told that speeding was a bad habit. My colleague, my friend, was actually told by someone who was driving a car that she should wear brighter clothing if she didn't want to get hit. My family has lived in this neighborhood since 1986, and this has been an ongoing issue on North Point Road. Specifically, my aunt and late uncle have both had to confront speeders over many years, and clearly taking matters in our own hands is not working. The police have gotten involved, and in their speed tracking trailers, the reports showed 35 violatable offenses in 2 months, with a top speed of 76 miles per hour by a motorist in that report that was reflected in a 2-month time span. Things aren't getting better, they're getting worse. I've witnessed neighbors driving past that sign at 42 miles per hour and did not even attempt to brake or slow down. Many say that this was presented to them in the last few weeks. This is untrue. I have before you a packet that will show the reports as well as the meetings that were held in 2019 to actually address these issues after the first study was conducted. This argument is being made that the speed humps would be an eyesore, but I don't know of any other physical viable solution. Every high-end neighborhood around our area has some type of pedestrian vehicle, such as a sidewalk speed hump or a median calming speed device. We do not have those in Lookout Point. We only have our streets. As a mother who's at the end of her rope of options, I beg of you to please make a difference. Please make a change for the better to help protect the integrity and safety of our community. At this point, I cannot imagine that doing nothing is a solution. The only thing I can see from doing nothing would be utter liability and negligence on behalf of our city. Thank you for your efforts to make our community safer and for hosting these studies. I hope you will take in consideration my voice, your own data, and the results of these studies as you look towards making a decision on June 7th. The fact that 5 speed humps is being recommended by the city's engineer should tell you something about the significance of this problem, and it should not be ignored. In the back of your packet, I also have a suggested kind of middle ground option as well. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Dupuy, and Herman Bruno. Please state your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Mona Depew, 16216 North Point Road. Is that better?
Yes.
I'm here to speak on behalf of not having speed bumps in the neighborhood, and I also agree with Mike in the beginning that we should evaluate what is there and what could be a better solution. I am a grandmother of 8, and when I take my grandchildren down the road, I never feel threatened. I always feel that they move over, and my little 2-year-old grandson walks beside me, and when I ask him to move over, he moves over. I sent you a letter to tell you that I was also concerned about first responder and the time that it takes for them to get down the street over 5 speed bumps when they're in a large fire truck. They have to slow down. Unfortunately, in 2017, my husband passed away of a heart attack, and the first responders on a good day, without speed bumps, still took 12 minutes to get to the house. If it took 14 minutes, those 2 minutes could mean a life. And so I'm very concerned about that. My son is a firefighter. He is not a fan of speed humps. And thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno, and then Jessica White.
All right, thank you. I'm not a speaker. This thing's make me nervous, so bear with me a little bit.
Well, first state your name and address.
I got 2 minutes, so
You got 2
Herman
minutes.
Bruno. I'm the HOA president for our neighborhood. I want to thank the homeowners that showed up today and really just focus on the facts. That's what I've been going off of. You know, the information has been out there. You'll see the packets. There's additional information out there. We have been working with Mr. Trott, which thank you very much for your help, and the guidance of our HOA management, which is Hawthorne Management, and they manage a lot of the communities in the area. I'm the father of 2 little girls, 4 and 6. We're at Leeward Lane, and you know, I've been at every single HOA meeting, and part of the problem that we have is in our neighborhood, there's not a lot of participation from our homeowners. You know, we're a small community, about 50-something homes, and there's 5 seats on the board. Usually there's 2 open, 1 or 2 open, and there's like 1 or 2 HOA members that actually participate in trying to get things done in the community. And that's part of the challenge. You know, I think there were some comments said that the information wasn't put out there. That's not accurate. You'll find that, you know, there's a history. We provided information to Mr. Trott. And, you know, more importantly, last year there was a death that occurred out there. A gentleman, Thomas, was ran over by a truck and died. And, he was out for a walk, and it was just a very unfortunate. I met his wife earlier this week, and I just don't want that to ever happen again. I'm out there every morning, every day, exercising or walking with the kids. Our neighborhood is a great neighborhood, and we have a lot of great homeowners there. And so I don't want their families to ever have to go through what Mr. Thomas's family is going through. So I think we need to look at the facts and the fact that we have a problem. I vote for some type of speed hump.
Thank you. Ms. White, and then Becky, and I'm sorry I can't read your last name, but it begins with an R, is up next. Good evening.
Good evening.
Please
Just,
state your name and address. 2 minutes.
Hot mic. Jessica White, 15705 North Point. And actually, the comments made, again, I'm very for the speed bumps, and I'll get into that. But what Mike said, actually, a lot of us were. I was in agreement with a lot of what he said, and he's, voiced concerns about the speed bumps. So I'm the house that he referred to that lives right at the corner of Terry Lane and North Point Road. So while, we signed up to live in this beautiful community knowing that we were on a corner, we're not in a cul-de-sac, like we know there's gonna be some speeding. I didn't anticipate the fact that, while I'm working from home, watching people speed on the road, we have to witness people, joggers, people with their dogs, not just my kids, and I'll get into that, being almost hit on a weekly basis. So with us, my son was actually born in 2017 with a near fatal virus. Thank God he will be okay, but he's deaf. He's 50% deaf in his, he's completely deaf in his left ear. He's 50% deaf overall. He can't, as some people here have graciously said, you can't just watch your kids or coach them. He can't hear us. And so with us being at the corner of that road and people, not necessarily the community members, but it's contractors, it's the people working on lawns, it's the people working on various home projects for the community. They're the ones that do a lot of the speeding too. And so by having an awareness program for the community, it doesn't really matter when you have a child that runs out into the road that can't hear the direction of the car, they can't locate sound, they can't even hear me yelling at them sometimes to stop. So it's not about parenting, it's not about watching your kids, it's about the fact that something needs to be done. It is completely unacceptable as adults to have somebody going 73 miles an hour down a road when there's a child with disabilities right there on that corner, and we're watching it every single day. So something needs to be done, guys.
Thank you, Ms. White. My address is 15705, so if you get any of my bills, you're welcome to pay it. All right, Becky with an R, and Lucinda with a C something, and I think H is next.
Hi, I'm Becky with an R, Rendelick, and I live at 15818 North Point, and I have a unique perspective of having my kitchen window face the main, strip of North Point, the biggest, longest stretch. And I agree with everybody, there are some speeders, there are some things that need to change, but I do notice that I think a lot of it is people, we all need to have a healthy respect of each other. I'm a runner and a biker, and I'm aware of, you got to be aware of stuff, and cars need to be aware of us. But I don't think the speed humps are going to help. I really do think there's more of an issue. If we could do something about Terry Lane, maybe Terry Lane coming into North Point, or maybe something down the road to kind of a couple stop signs in between places, I think that would help immensely. But I do believe that Terry Lane at the corner of North Point is a huge issue and a very dangerous issue for pretty much everybody. There's a lot of trees that cover the signs, and it is a blind curve. But that's what I have to say. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Lucinda with a C, and then up next is Mitch Baer. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Oh, okay, well, all right. Mr. Baer? evening. Please state your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, hello, my name is Mitch Bear. I live at 16224 Leeward Lane. I do serve on the board, and it has been an issue that has been brought up from people that live in the neighborhood and also those that live outside of the neighborhood, because we are public streets. We do not have sidewalks on Terry Lane or in through North Point proper. So I think some people have gotten the impression that we were trying to railroad this process. I came in to the board in the middle of the process because it was started back in 2018. This is basically, from my standpoint, to get some information and proof from the town of what kind of speeding issues are going on, and obviously there are some. I don't think it's anybody's intention to create hostility between those for and against, but to come up with a solution that where we can come to compromise and live, happily as neighbors. Perhaps the thing to do is, as opposed to 4 to 5 speed bumps in a 1,600-foot strip, is maybe to sit down with traffic and figure out maybe there's a hybrid solution. Perhaps maybe we do 1 or 2 speed bumps strategically placed somewhere at this bend in the road, where basically North Point is like a roller coaster. You start from the entrance to the neighborhood, it goes straight down, and then it goes up North Point. So when you're coming down North Point, you come back down the railroad and back up like a roller coaster again. I know the police, or through the traffic department, they did put out the radar speed signs. I did notice out walking that people, once they saw that and they got feedback, they did slow down. But that may not be 100% all the time, so that's maybe 1 speed bump down there would be necessary. But I'm just trying to find a way there's a solution that we can come together and figure this out effectively without hostilities, because we don't need to have tension and animosity against neighbors, for the rest of their occupancy in their homes. So thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. All right, I believe there's nobody else that has signed up to speak. All right, any questions of staff at this time? No? Commissioner Hines?
Yeah, can I ask Mr. Trott a question?
Yes.
Are stop signs effective traffic calming devices?
Yeah, stop signs are not to be used for speed control.
Okay.
You've got speed limit signs out there, and people aren't obeying those. So put more signs up to try to slow people down, or is that really going to work? But stop signs are not to be used for speed control issues.
We heard the last gentleman speak about finding a consensus among the neighborhood. Are there other creative options that you're aware of at this point, or you think these recommendations of the 2 options are the best at this point?
We've had a lot of success with speed humps. When we put in speed humps in other neighborhoods, which we do, we go back out after the fact and do post studies to see, okay, we put in a speed hump here, let's go exactly between the humps and see what speeds we're getting. What we found is that the speed has been reduced in those locations. So we put those in, we've done post studies and seen success. Depending on the neighborhood and depending on intersection spacing, you can look at other options such as maybe mini circles, basically putting a small roundabout in there. Challenges with those are sometimes you need right-of-way, or sometimes there may be utility impacts. So there's something that can be done, but it'll take longer to get those implemented, and could affect property owners, directly adjacent to those. Maybe have to relocate a driveway or mailboxes, things like that. So those do present challenges. I believe the neighborhood, and I think one of the speakers talked about the radar feedback signs. The studies I've seen with those long-term are short-term, they work well. They make people aware of what's going on. They bring your attention. It's something new. It's something flashing at you saying, hey, look at me, look at me. Long-term, those effects are lessened. You get used to it, unless there's enforcement, you're seeing something else, over and over every day, and you just become accustomed to it.
My last question. Heard Terry Lane a lot. That's the main road coming in. Is that a town road, Terry Lane?
I'd have to double check. I think it is.
So a request comes in from an HOA or someone, in this case on North Point, that's HOA. Do we have to get people to look at Terry Lane prior to studying Terry Lane? Or is Terry Lane, how does that work? Did we take any of that data into consideration if we have any of the data?
Sure. When we get in a request, we ask that the request be endorsed by an HOA if there is one. And so we look for is the road in the community? So if somebody on Terry Lane asks for a study on a different road in town, we'd ask for endorsement of the request where the road is located. So I'd have to look to see if all of Terry Road is located within the community or not. If it's not, then we ask for, I believe it's 3 or 4 residents who live along that street to endorse the request for study.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, we'll close that public hearing. Thank you all for coming.
Mr. Mayor, I did have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Before we
We'll
close
reopen it.
that public hearing. Just a quick question. I'm looking on Polaris now, is there a stop sign at Terry Lane and North Point?
Look back. I'll pull up a map here, and
Right there.
I would assume that there is a stop sign on North Point at Terry Lane. I'd have to go look and check that.
There is one. There's one when you come out of North Point and you go out on Terry Lane, but there's nothing straight shotting Terry Lane. Like Terry Lane's just a straight shot down.
And the reason I'm asking that is I heard several people say, Terry Lane at North Point is an issue. So, just making an observation there
Sure.
and asking that question, because
We
from
can certainly check
from
to see-
Polaris, it looks like it's an interesting angle.
We
And
can certainly
I-
check to see if there's minimum sight distance at that intersection.
Okay, thank you.
And
You're welcome.
so, I'm just gonna throw this out. Because Terry Lane doesn't have that many homes directly on it, everything seems to be kind of off, like offshoots. Would like Pine need to have their input into potentially doing something on Terry Lane, or would it just be Terry Lane? Because I'm like trying to think, it's a very small amount of people that live on there technically.
Yeah, the policy looks for, again, it's either 3 or 4 residents who live directly on the street if there is no HOA. If there is a street that has an HOA, we look for that HOA endorsement of the request. Again, looking for that community to say, yes, we want to look at this and go through the process.
So did we reopen the public hearing?
Yeah.
Because I guess my question is, I heard from numerous residents, they want to get together with the whole community. So is it better at this point for us to continue the public hearing, to a period of time in the future, instead of it going to the planning board at the end of this month, or not?
Well, what I was gonna suggest, first of all.
This doesn't go to the planning board.
Yeah,
I don't know if-
Okay.
Just say,
What
at
I
a
was
future meeting.
Going to suggest when I close the public hearing, was that if the HOA sets up a meeting between now and whenever the decision was going to be made, I believe staff would be willing to go there and potentially work out some type of compromise, if there's a compromise to be made. So, in the meantime, we would close this public hearing, and then if the HOA comes back to us and says, can you look at something else or not do something, or it'll go to a vote in June.
Look, then can I ask that we make sure that we look at that intersection prior to that meeting,
I
so
think
that we
that's
know?
all part of what
Okay, just
potential
making
meeting
sure.
would be like.
If there's a sight distance issue, we need to take care of it.
What I've been sitting here listening to both sides of this argument and this debate. I think the best thing that's come out of this whole thing is I think you've kind of grown better as a neighborhood in the last 30 minutes. And I thank the president of the HOA. Thank you very much for your service. If you could get everybody together, like the mayor suggested, the town would be more than willing to sit down and work this thing out as a neighborhood, not as a town government, but you guys come back and tell us what you would like to see. Thank you.
And as a point of information, if it is on our agenda in June, we always can delay that decision. So I'd rather close this and move on. Okay, good. All right, we'll close the public hearing and we'll see you all maybe. Give it a couple of seconds as people mingle around. Our next item on the agenda is to open up a public hearing on petition R20-05, a request by Vermillion Anchor Mill Village, LLC, and Vermillion Village, LLC, to modify the approved conditional district, R16-12, that includes a mix of 400 units, apartments, and townhomes, and 165,000 square feet of non-residential to Town Center Conditional District for 292 apartments, 49 townhomes, and a minimum of 70,000 square feet of non-residential on 30 acres generally located at 404 North Church Street. Mr. Semino?
Mr. Mayor, first of all, just remember this on my way to the restroom.
Yes.
I need to make a disclosure. I have property on 2nd Street that I'm currently developing. Very close proximity to this, but it would not affect any of my decision. I have property right beside Mr. Bowman. We're selling to the same builder. We have no contractual relationship whatsoever, and none of that stuff would impact any decision on this project.
Any discussion on that? Okay. All right, Mr. Semino, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you, Mayor. Board members, enter the staff report into the record. I'm going to be brief tonight. The site in question is just under 30 acres right off of Huntersville Concord Road and actually fronts on North Main. So what's the change? First off, the approved rezoning plan from 2017 is what you see on your screen at this point in time. That plan that is already approved, invested for development, is for 400 multifamily units, and that is a combination of apartments and townhomes, but not specified as to exactly what that breakdown would be. In addition, it was up to 165,000 square feet of commercial and office type area. What is the proposal? This is R2005. I will point out that you may recall in early January there was a request to make a change, and at that time the developer proposed 22,000 square feet and about the same number of residential, and that was not well received by the public or the town board, so the developer modified the plan. So this new plan is 292 apartments with 49 townhomes and a minimum of 70,000 square feet of commercial area. I do want to point out the commercial is in the green buildings, and it's a combination of 1-story and 2-story buildings as shown on the screen at this point on the right-hand side. As with every development, there is a traffic impact analysis, every development that exceeds a threshold. And I know that a lot of emails have been going back and forth about traffic. So I do want to make it clear that every development that comes through the process that exceeds that threshold has to do a traffic impact analysis. And if they find they negatively impact a intersection below our accepted level of service by ordinance, that they have to mitigate. In this particular instance, there are 3 areas that need to be mitigated. The intersection of NC 115 at Gilead Road and Huntersville Concord Road needs a mitigation of a lighting phasing. This is recommendations from our town traffic engineer, and so Stephen Trott is here to answer any questions you might have specifically. There's 2 entrances on Huntersville Concord to the development. One is at Cinnabar, and there are 3 improvements that are proposed there at driveway 1. And then the second entrance, which is driveway 2, there's several recommended improvements there as well. This is a kind of a blown up view of the intersection of Huntersville Concord Road to the new development and how it enters into across the street Cinnabar and Hill Street. I will point out that this does show the road improvements that are being talked about. But I also want to point out that there is also this 10-foot side path, and why that's important is in December of this year, the town board adopted the Bikeway Greenway Plan. The Bikeway Greenway Plan recommended side paths, not a wide lane with a bike lane in this section of Huntersville Concord Road. So the developer is accommodating that change with a 10-foot wide side path across the entire frontage of Huntersville Concord Road. Staff recommendation is we could support this conditional rezoning amendment, subject to all traffic impact analysis from the town and DOT. There is DOT roads, and they will have to give approval, and that those improvements be provided, that all outstanding transportation comments be addressed, and all outstanding red line comments are addressed. And ultimately, when this comes up for possible final action, the large building that was in the original plan from 2017 had to get a special use permit because it exceeded the footprint size, and so that special use permit would have to be withdrawn. And that paperwork is in, and we just are timing it to follow with this rezoning. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions. The developer is here. I have some slides that they asked to be provided as well. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Commissioner Walsh?
You mentioned and if you don't have this information right off the top of your head, I'm good, or maybe we can find out. You mentioned the large building that is going to be removed. Do you know about how many square feet that is from the, excuse me, from the original plan?
I'm sorry, I don't have that square footage. I'm thinking it's between 50 and 65,000 square feet.
Well, can we hold that thought? Okay. Well, when you have your time to present, we'll make sure you answer that. Any other questions of staff? I have a question. So, being here when this went through its original rezoning, we had to do the special use permit because it was a larger building and was, I guess, allowed. What was this zoned for prior to what this plan is that was approved in 2017?
Right. Neighborhood residential, so residential.
Okay. But the overall plan over the last 20 years, I mean, we've seen a lot of plans come and go for this particular, since the town owned it. Was it mixed use?
There was, if you will indulge me, I'll pull up the slide that show a couple of plans that we're talking about. For the most part, 2005, that's the upper plan, the downtown plan, was looking at residential. It talked about mixed use, but a key component of that was continuing care retirement community as an option, that's a potential. The 2007 plan that was adopted, East Huntersville plan, more of a transit-oriented design, so it was more residential. There could be some commercial in there, but that was the plans that were there. So does that answer your question?
Yep. Any other questions of staff before we hear from the applicant, who has only 15 minutes?
Actually, I have just another one, sorry. So this proposal is a reduction of, I think it's 165,000 square feet of commercial down to roughly 70,000, 400 apartments down to 292. How does our housing mix for our downtown compare to like Davison and Cornelius?
Let me go to that slide. So a few months ago, I provided the town board some information as to if you take an intersection of a town and go a half mile, what's the housing mix? So this map represents that. So this is Huntersville, and we just picked the intersection of 115 and Gilead Road as being the center from the half mile. And so in that area, you'll notice I have some letters in there. VV is Vermillion Village, VF is Vermillion Front, and TC is the town center mixed use that went through. So if you include those, And then change from Vermillion Village to reduce the size as they're proposing. There would be 505 single-family houses in that half mile, 301 condominium townhomes, and 490 apartments. Again, that's with the proposed request that's before you. So if you look at Cornelius and Davidson, that half mile spacing from the key intersection, there's 661 single family in Cornelius, 478 condo and townhomes. I wrote proposal because there's an ongoing proposal before the downtown, for the downtown in Cornelius, and they just amended their comprehensive plan to allow more density in their downtown. So that's 528 if that gets approved. And then today there's 548 apartments built and approved. And with the proposal that would go up to 946, so you can kind of compare to Huntersville. In Davidson there's 595 single family. So of the single family, Huntersville is the least number of single family in that half mile radius. 81 condos, townhomes, 36 apartments. So they have much fewer condos and much fewer apartments, but they also have this, the Davidson school, Davidson College, and that is 1,841 students plus your staff, and 95% of the students live on campus, so that's kind of a wild card. But just to give you a sense of where we are to our neighbors, it's not to say one's right or one's wrong, it's just that's answering your question.
Thank you.
Commissioner Munger?
Yeah, don't go back to that one quick. I just had questions about that particular. So for the Huntersville including approved, does that mean for the Vermillion Village numbers, it includes the previously approved plan, or is it with this new plan?
This is the new plan. So the number of apartments is 491, and that represents the current plan that they have. Because remember, the plan that's approved today is 400,
sure,
but it's a combination of apartments and townhomes, and it's not specified as to what is what.
I just wanted clarification on that number. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions of staff this time? No? Mr. Bowman?
Yeah, can you just put up the comparison one?
Mr. Bowman, you have 15 minutes. You don't have to take it all.
No, I won't. Nate Bowman, 205 South Church Street. Jack did a great job explaining most of these changes, which were a result of the public hearing in January. I just want to add a few things. Can you put up the buildings again? I mean, the comparison? Current plan, yeah. Originally, the original supermarket we had, in case we hit a home run, was 76,000 square feet. And that's the biggest Harris Teeter or Kroger builds. And of course, we never got that and went down to 46,000. And if you total up all what's in red, that's showing about 90,000 square foot of commercial, which is really what we expected to get if we got the grocery store. But we did throw in the kitchen sink in that rezoning in case we were wildly successful. But unfortunately, we were wildly unsuccessful. So in the plan you see here, the major changes is the anchor, which was going to be the grocery store. We had to move our commercial out to the road. The whole theory about the anchor and the grocery store in the center was that would pull the traffic in, and that would help the retail. With no grocery store, we had to move it to the outside where the traffic count is the heaviest. And we did leave the brewery restaurant site over next to where the tower is, the water tower, because that's just a perfect place to have an amenity for that restaurant, hopefully / brewery. The road system is essentially the same. We're making the same connection points. We did change Church Street a little bit. The roundabout was not needed up near Delwood, but most of the connections are in the same location, providing great access to and from, and I think it's 5, 6 different directions, 6 different roads. The buildings, again, that we're showing, the one-story buildings are planning to be retail. We're going to try to go after a small market. The best one you could probably visualize in our area is Reed's, but we've been searching for some other ones. It's about an 11,000 square foot market. The two-story buildings there will probably be office on the top, obviously, and retail on the first floor. And again, it's 70,000 square feet. That's a reach. That's going to be a lot of effort. But Steve Vermillion is obviously still in the deal since we added all this commercial back in. So some of our financial success or failure is still riding on getting tenants in for the commercial and retail space. Want to remind everybody that we're putting our stormwater underground, which is expensive, but also doesn't take up space with a lot of BMP and ponds. We're saving 45% of the trees because we have the huge common area to the west, and we actually are saving 20% of the existing tree canopy, and the open space, totaling the urban open space and natural open space, is almost 20% of the site. So this site is still well buffered from the existing neighborhoods. It's closest to Vermillion, but we've been able to increase the buffer to the back of the homes on Delwood. Glendale. Why I keep saying Delwood? Sorry, BJ. BJ's here, so I got a BJ on the mind. On Glendale. And the buffer, obviously with the park to the west, is anywhere between 160 and 340 feet. And our parking is almost double what's required. So those are just some nuts and bolts of it, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. We did have the elevations. If you had any questions, Jack? This is of some of the units. Our apartment developer is out of San Antonio, Texas, built in a lot of neighborhoods like Huntersville, more suburban locations. This is the latest rendering that we have, and we've had this vetted by the planning staff. And these are some examples of what they've done around the country. Okay.
So with the commercial, do you know if Mr. Vermillion has any prospects or any signed leases at this point? Or is everything...
We're not putting the cart before the horse this time. We tried for 5 years. So once this is approved, it would be a year before we would even get, probably a year and a half before the pads would even be on the ground. So we are taking suggestions from any resident who's been emailing me, anywhere from Mass General Store to General Dollar. We want a little more upscale. One of our commissioners even emailed me a store up in Mooresville. So we are actively scouting and following leads, but it's a little too early to get anybody who would sign up for something that hasn't been approved yet.
Sure. If this project were to be approved and you go in and do your development, do you plan on developing these pads and doing spec buildings at the same time?
We plan on developing the entire neighborhood at once. Whether we put up a spec building or not has not been determined yet. But all the pads, all the parking will be in.
Okay.
So somebody won't have to guess and say, oh, well, here's the apartments, here's the townhomes, what's these weeds over here? No, we can't have that with the apartment developer. Everything will be in, the infrastructure, the parking lots, everything.
Okay. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Walsh?
I was just trying to do the math on the grocery store being removed. So if the new number is 70,000 square feet, less the grocery store, how much commercial is actually going down? That makes sense?
Yeah, I'm a little lost.
So if you do the side by side,
essentially what was in red was about 90 if we didn't get the large supermarket, which we just put that building in there. More typical would have been that red would have been 48,000 square feet. And by the time you add the smaller retail commercial buildings in red, it would be 90,000. So that was the more realistic number.
90,000 is the small red buildings?
And the grocery store if it was 48,000 square feet. In other words, we didn't want to come back if we were extremely successful. So we asked for everything we threw in the kitchen sink. Right. And then we came up empty. So, but more realistic would have been that grocery store at about 2/3 its size at about 48,000 square feet, and the other buildings would have been the same size and that would have been around 90,000 square feet.
So in a sense, the commercial's gone up a little bit if you take out the grocery store.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Any other questions of Commissioner Munger?
Yeah. How long have you been working on trying to develop this particular area?
It's between 4 and 5 years. Oh, originally, probably 17, 18 years. I was selected by another town board to do the development, and then a subsequent town board didn't like the mixed-use new urbanist plan. I'd have to go back and read the newspaper articles. Maybe Lee is here. And then, of course, the mill burned, and that kind of, we were going to rehab the mill. That was going to be space for a new town hall, police station. I mean, pie in the sky. It was a huge building, and we need to fill it up. So it's probably getting now 18 or 19 years.
Okay. And if you can you provide us with a specific example of a mixed-use development that's been developed by Steve Vermillion in the recent past?
Birkdale Village.
Okay.
And
So
I have a
13
book
years
this
past?
thick. Yeah, he was the lead developer in Birkdale Village, which
Okay.
is de facto
Anything more
your.
recent than that?
Steve's not available, he's in Wilmington, but I'll be happy to get you a list of his projects. He's done 35 Harris Teeter shopping centers in the southeast alone.
And some of those have been within the last 5 to 10 years?
Oh, absolutely,
I'd
absolutely.
be curious to see
Yeah,
that.
but I will get the information from Steve.
Okay.
I have a question. The light at Cinnabar.
Right.
That was a real big issue. If approved, would you put the light in?
That is not my decision. NCDOT has not weighed in on this. If you remember, it also was a big issue for the neighbors who are going to have their road blown up and the entry monuments taken out. So we're going to do what NCDOT and the town requires. At this point, we have not, as usual, we've heard from the town, we've had comments back, our TIA accepted, but we don't have a final ruling from NCDOT. But there are other options for pedestrian crossings if a stoplight is not warranted. So we're open to seeing what NCDOT says and coming up with a pedestrian solution if the stoplight is not warranted for traffic.
Well, my question is, if they don't require it but allow it,
I'm not aware they do that.
well, they were willing to do it on another, over.
That would be news to me. We don't plan to voluntarily put in a traffic light that NCDOT doesn't require, simply because, you know, they are our gatekeeper. And I've never,
But if you want people to safely cross from Vermillion with
if
Metro line across-
NCDOT says you can put in that light, if they could allow me to put in the light without destroying the entrance and uprooting the road and trees in front of existing Vermillion, now that would be a good choice. That would be very interesting to me, because they don't need the storage for a shopping center. So that would, I would be open to, because that would mean that they're looking for other solutions besides blowing up a neighborhood. And there's no reason to blow up the neighborhood if the traffic counts aren't such that, you know, there's a shopping center across the street of the size that we have. So I'd be very interested in that. Maybe you could sit in with me on NCDOT.
Commissioner Boone?
Thank you. Mr. Bowman, I've been looking at this property since I've been on the board. And 2017, the left side of my screen, that proposal answered a lot of questions for the town. It took the property that the town had on their books for 25 years. We sold it to a developer, and it answered the community wanting a grocery store. It solved a lot of the traffic issues on Gilead Road. The neighbors wanted it, the town voted to approve it, and then the grocery store fell through. And we've seen at least two different proposals until where we're at now. And to go from 165 to 70,000 square feet that might contain a small grocery store, you've already said that you're scouting for leads, and non-residential can mean office spaces, and you said it, and the two-story building is probably some type of retail with office of doctors or tax accountants or something like that. I don't think that that's what the people that live on this side of town, on that side of town, are looking. They're looking for more retail and less apartments. Thank you.
And the sad news is, you know, Steve felt that Harris Teeter had some serious interest. But we have 5 grocery stores once Lowe's opens up within a mile and a half of the property. And that was my dream too, was to get the grocery store over here. But as Lee Sullivan wrote in the paper, the market decided. None of the grocery stores wanted to come, and that was before COVID. So the fact that we all want something, and I wanted it for my Vermillion neighbors, for the people in Centennial, for everybody on this side of town, wanting it didn't make it happen. It's a financial decision by huge corporations, and they basically have said no is the answer. So we're trying to come up with the second best solution to solve some of those issues. And that's what I think we have this time. We obviously didn't meet your requirements in January, but by moving up from 22,000 to 70,000, putting that goal in front of us, it's going to be a challenge, but we think that's the best solution on this side of town. Again, the traffic counts at Rosedale are in the low 30,000 cars a day, and the traffic counts up at Burkdale are 30,000 a day. And where the new Publix is going in on 73, which is 5 miles away, remember Steve's rule, they have to be 5 miles away from a current store, that traffic count is in the low 23,000 a day. And we are only at 8,900. So that is your market. That is why they're saying they're not coming. They'd rather be near the interstate or on a heavily traveled road.
Well, I'm not going to debate the issue with you, but Aldi's has come into Huntersville. Publix, like you've mentioned, came out on Highway 73. And your argument of they want to be on the interstate, there's examples all over the state of North Carolina that shows big supermarkets away from the interstate.
Well, this was, widely taken to every grocery store possible by Steve Vermillion. And I think his ability and his expertise in the industry is well known. And, 4 years, 5 years, $450,000 in engineering expenses, that was not just kind of a flippant effort. That was a full-blown effort by a really top professional in his field. And that's what the marketplace has said. So sooner or later you have to move on. And that's what we've tried to do with what we think is the best option.
Any other questions? Commissioner Hines?
Yeah, this for Mr. Semino. Mr. Semino, if the plan was not approved and they had no option other than to develop the property as it was in 2017, is the 60,000, I think he said 60,000, 70,000 square foot grocery building, is it conditional? Is the plan approved that that is the only thing that could be in that site, a grocery store, or is it open to anything that is zoned commercial?
Anything that would fit that commercial zoning. It was not specified that it has to be a grocery store.
Okay.
Everything up to that point was the square footage, and it would be a grocery store. And as Mr. Bowman mentioned, they were shooting for the largest footprint that Harris Teeter had at that time, but were expecting something less.
And per that plan, I mean, it says up to 165,000 square feet. Could they have just done the development with 50,000 square feet?
No, and that's kind of what happened. I mean, what happened was they wanted to cut back on the commercial substantially. And so the initial proposal was 22,000 square feet. And so staff, working with the town attorney, is this a substantial change? The answer was yes, because that's much different than what the town board thought and much different than what the public thought. So, we full well believe that the intent was to build what was approved in 2017. And if it was a grocery store, they always bring in the out parcels. They're the anchor tenant for that reason. And so that was a viable development. Without the anchor tenant grocery store, it changes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Phillips?
For the applicant, would you guarantee any percentage of retail instead of just saying commercial?
The first floor of all the buildings is what we're going after.
Because-
And, yeah, the first floor, because, you know, retail doesn't want to go up on a second story unless we're in New York City or something. So we'll commit to the retail on the first floor. And then if there's a problem, we'll come back to you because we substantially didn't do what we said. And if the market says, no, that's ridiculous, we'll have to come back and tell you. But that's what we're going after, is the first floor of all those buildings as retail.
Commissioner Walsh?
I just want to reiterate, so there's going to be a restaurant over or a brewery on the left side of this, and the 3 buildings that we see in green will have.
Let me just say this, if the market, okay.
And the first floor on the buildings that face Huntersville Concord Road will be retail.
Right, but I'm saying if for some reason the market didn't want to go on the 1-story building over on Huntersville Concord Road, but we had one that wanted to go over near the roundabout where the brewery site was? The water tower, yeah, thank you. Tucson corrects me. So in other words, we want to have flexibility. It's not restaurant, brewery. What retail site could go there? If it ended up being a Ferrucci's and a bakery there. I mean, we're going to really try to get a nice mix of tenants that will support the neighborhood. And we want to do it all on the first floor.
Okay?
Any other comments? We have a few people signed up and some remotely. All right. I do want to acknowledge that we did receive a number of emails. Sarah Chambers, Kathy Jones, Steve Tram, Amy Hallman, Anthony and Samantha Maglianico, Ann Dispensis, Rachel LaFawn, Lynn Betancourt, Kelly Harrison, Christy and Zach Bortle, Kristen Hofield, Bradley Brand, Katie Faraci, Lindsay and Eric Crone. So I'll ask our town clerk to put those in the minutes. And then again, you have 24 hours after the close of this hearing to send any emails in. Our first speaker tonight will be somebody we've missed for a long time, Miss B.J. Caldwell. And after that, Amy Hallman. You do have 3 minutes. Is Ms. Caldwell still here? Okay.
I have copies.
Good evening. Please state your name and address, and you might be out of practice. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to be back, and I hope COVID has been kind to you. I lost a lot of family and friends, but anyway, life goes on. BJ Betty Caldwell, 14521 New Haven Drive, Huntersville, North Carolina. Generation 2021 did not start the injustice of unfair treatment to descendants of the enslaved African in America, but can be the one to set in motion changes to correct it by listening to our story and hearing our pain. Black citizens in Pottstown and in East Huntersville communities suffer from internalized oppression. Because of our race, we were relegated to the section of land where we were by laws and action of the government set into a pattern that could displace us and our culture and destroy our homes, and it never seems to end. After the Civil War and Reconstruction, there are 4 communities original to the area. Pottstown, designated in 1909, and homes that grew out of it on Church Street, Central Avenue, and Delwood Drive. Land owned by Scrooby Gibson sold parcels to blacks in the area called Gibson Park. And in the 1950s, east on Holbrook Road, New Haven Park was developed. In the 1990s, Huntersville Community Development Association, in conjunction with the Farmers Home Administration, built homes in Whispering Pines. Homes in the Mill and in Old Huntersville are east of the railroad and are the most historic in Huntersville. Today, each area is surrounded by Vermillion or Valencia, and hear me clearly, the areas have gentrified. In the new millennium, developers and investors have been on a fast track to be famous and multimillionaires, by offering to purchase homes in the area I call the last frontier. Come in and you can see the trees. When residents are offended and seek help from the government in order to remain in our homes, they are looked down upon because of having owned the property for many years and were not able to improve it. Many play the devil's advocate and ask why we didn't want some developers, investors to make their own fortune. I have been told you can make some money too. The money given, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, will not buy a home any place in the county. Too bad for you, but you helped make another millionaire. Well, I'm here tonight to pass on the good news to some and the bad news to others. For those who call Huntersville, East Huntersville home for over the last 120 years, it is good news to hear for people who have become developers and want to buy out our land. The communities have gentrified, meaning 4 churches whose members have gathered there for over a century are now under the gun, or shall I say, the shopping block of developers and investors. So I end by saying, feather in the caps of developers and investors whose dreams have come true, and dirt in the faces of us whose dreams of holding on to our land and culture bit the dust. Thank you very much for your time, and I have copies for you.
You want to give those to Mr. Roberts, and he'll hand them out for you? Next speaker is Miss Amy Holman, and then Charles Gelslider. And then you might have some people calling in, I assume. Good evening. Please state your name and address. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Amy Holman, 100 Cambridge Road. I don't know how I go after that. For the last 9 months, as a very vocal and engaged citizen, I have heard from each of you stress the importance of buttoning down every detail, from the TIA to the planning board red lines to the specific number of apartments and concrete number of trees to save to the sidewalks to pour. We are right to be concerned that we cannot get a commitment for either a grocery store anchor or any specific types of retail for Vermillion Village. We are right to be concerned when we hear the term potential office space when thrown around. I believe in the number of rooftops we've committed to add already in our downtowns. We need to make sure that the retail is indeed coming and has a place to go. If we continue to approve more residential, particularly in lieu of retail, we are lessening the actual acreage on which to put said retail. With Vermillion Village, Vermillion Front, odds and end rentals being built around it, and North State, we will have at least 260 new homes of apartments and townhomes within a half mile, all within our downtown only, before anyone starts on the current town hall corner lot. And since the residential developers bought that adjacent lot too, we can only guess. I've seen a commissioner response say the current plan is actually smaller than the original plan. Like that's a plus. But the number of townhouses has increased because the retail has decreased so significantly. The overall footprint isn't our point at this time. With the original plan was presented, the anchor was appealing to masses. And like that 2-acre parcel we're all familiar with, residents were capable of swallowing the parts of the original project that they didn't like in order to progress the downtown and get the parts they do want. But we're here again because the carrot's gone, yanked out from in front of us, pulling that 65,000 square feet of commercial space that we were looking forward to certainly make the project smaller. But residents are tired of being told one thing and then learning later that the plan's been switched. This cannot and should not be the acceptable pattern. 20 years Anchor Mill property has sat undeveloped. The last 10 years, though, seems to be an exercise in wearing you and us down. The town invested significantly with our tax dollars to grow the downtown, to assist this very aspect of downtown development. Was that done for the apartments and townhouses and a sprig of potential office space? Also, I believe it's important to consider the residents who currently live there. If you approve this vote at a later date, you're telling these longtime residents they can't stay there unless they want to sell their homes to the developer because they're not even on the plan. But don't worry, they can buy back into their own neighborhoods from the developer. I'm not even going to discuss the tax implications because, you know, voting to approve this at the later point signals you're worn down and too tired to help us in our town. Please don't be that vote. Please help us out. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, Charles Gelsenleiter, and then Miss Kathy Jones may be calling in. Good evening.
Charles Gelsenleiter, 201 3rd Street. I've discussed before in the past about my issues with the traffic, because I live right there on 3rd Street, which abuts this future project if it happens. The traffic that if you have a proposed Walter Street connection throughout there, the traffic will be coming for these residents in these apartments. They'll be wanting to come off of Huntersville Concord Road and take a left right there up to Walters instead of driving all the way down to the main entrance and turning left on there. To put this increased Walter Street connection, you would have to take the longtime residents that live there, you would have to buy out right away to expand these roads, and thus then we'll have an issue of people just driving, zipping right through there, and then we'll have another discussion up here talking about, do we need speed humps again? So basically, you know, even I was like yesterday, the Hello Huntersville Festival, which I walked up there later and visited that, which was nice, but noticed the traffic was backed up, parked all the way to 3rd Street. You got all these people that come here that want to go to these festivals, and there's no place for these people to park. And you add parking all up along Church Street, and then you got about 400, 300, 400 people that live in this apartment complex that where, the traffic's going to be even worse. So really the town needs to have something about parking, a real issue about downtown parking. There needs to be spaces for that. But also you're just adding a lot more headache to the residents that live there now. And all we're getting is, well, maybe there's going to be retail, maybe there's going to be a grocery store. We had to approve, RFP way back in 2015 to sell this property on the basis of what, this big plan. And we're getting this. And I was for the, I liked, there was going to be a grocery store in that approved plan, but we're not getting that, and I can't get any guarantees on what the retail is, so it's kind of you're going to get apartments. That we know that. No retail, we don't know yet. So thanks.
All right, thank you. Is Ms. Jones on the line? Excuse me?
Hello?
Yes, Ms. Jones? Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Kathy Jones, 104 Walter Street. We're here once again to talk about Vermillion Village. The town has owned this large piece of property for decades, waiting for the right opportunity to revitalize this area. Open Development Group came in and promised a vision that excited the town and its residents. He said, it's really neighborhood goods and services we're after. He told everyone in the 2017 meeting that 22 to 70,000 square feet, it still doesn't guarantee non-residential will be anything other than offices. Two new projects have been approved since the Vermillion Village process began. Those projects will add another 109 units across the road from this one. These projects, as well as the biologic minor developments happening in the adjacent neighborhood, with more on the way, to make the number of new units in the immediate area upwards of 500. 500 new units on a country road and emptying into neighboring communities, affecting every existing resident on Huntersville Rockford Road. This must factor into your decision-making process. The developments that have are still being built along Huntersville Rockford Road also play a role in the traffic count. Imagine in 3 years, the Vermillion Village, Trott, Walden, and other minor developments are complete. And don't forget about real estate markets, just 3 blocks away, and the land beside Foster's Springs that will more than likely end up being apartments. The Main Street project will be hard pressed to help negate all of the congestion, and it'll just be a nightmare. In closing, I'm requesting the board reject this revised plan unless the developer can make a commitment that a large part of the non-residential will be retail and a small market of some sort included. Again, I'm not trying to stop development. Citizens want development that takes into account their wants and their needs, and what best fits everyone in the community. Let's cut to the chase and get the show on the road. We're tired of waiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Amber Kovacs. Is she on the line still? You just need to unmute. Ms. Kovacs?
Hello.
Yes, good evening. Please state your name and address. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Amber Kovacs and I live at 207 Greenway Street. I recently reached out and met Mr. Bowman at his office to discuss his plans for the Anchor Mill project because after attending the virtual community meeting, I had more questions that I wanted to ask. Upon discussing the plans with Mr. Bowman and hearing his plans, I expressed that if he was able to have the shops and retail that he discussed in these plans submitted to the town, that it would be something that could benefit existing residents as they deserve something for all their losses. Upon review of the most recent plans, I see that there is intended space for commercial. The term commercial is far too broad of a term that makes the intention sound great, but without a commitment to specific kinds of retail in lieu of office space, I cannot get behind this. As a resident on the edge of the project, I'd like to see this be developed to benefit the people that are already living there and provide them something when they're using so much. Shops, places to eat, grocers, etc. are things that I believe most residents could see being beneficial. Without Bowman's commitment to specific retail, but rather commercial, we risk offices being placed in these spaces, and we're back to square one with no benefits in the foreseeable future, but loss of land. With so many high-density projects already approved, this project should remain the retail, commercial plan it began as so that it can help bring the town's vision to fruition. I ask that if assurances cannot be made for specific types of retail, do not approve this project until they can do so. If the developer cannot make good on his original project, perhaps we should consider selling this property to a developer with a vision more aligned with the town board, and its residents. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all for our public speakers, I believe, on this subject. Any questions of staff or the applicant? You'll have 3 minutes at the end to sum up. That's part of the new rules. I have a question, Mr. Simino. So we just heard, and we've, what's the difference between retail and commercial, and is there any way that the town could require something specifically to be built on 1 or 2 floors of any development in our town? In terms
The
of whatever?
town in and of itself could not do that, but an applicant can make commitments to do that through the conditional zoning, and you can agree. And I think you heard Mr. Bowman mention that that's what he would be willing to do. Now, there is a fair comment about, well, commercial could be anything from A to Z. So a bottom line is it'll be up to the applicant to put conditions on the plan that more specifically highlights what they would be willing to do.
Okay. All right. Any questions before Mr. Bowman gets his 3 minutes to sum up? Okay, Mr. Bowman?
Well, I need to sit down with Steve and go over with retail/commercial definitions and what the categories are. But before it goes to planning board, we're going to have a commitment that will be part of the conditional rezoning, that it is not going to be just office space over there. We're going to have a retail commitment that will be on the conditional plan.
Okay.
But I need Steve to sit down with me and let's really map out the different types of uses so you will know what those are and our commitment to that first floor, which would total 47,600 square feet on the first floor. There's only 22,000 square feet of office.
Okay. All right.
That's the equivalent of a huge grocery store split up amongst a lot of different tenants.
Can you give us those numbers again? I'm taking.
The total is 70,000 square feet we're showing in the 4 buildings, and it's 47,600 first floor and 22,400 second floor. So we'll have a commitment there before we go to planning board, and we'll share that with all of you.
Okay. All right. Is that good? All right. Thank you. Any other questions? I'll close that public hearing, and we'll move to item 8C, which is conduct a public hearing on petition TA 21-01, amendments to the Huntersville zoning and subdivision ordinance to comply with state statute 160D.
Thank you, Mayor. Board members, enters the staff report into the record. This is an amendment to the entirety of the zoning ordinance in the subdivision ordinance to comply with 160D. And that's what the state statutes have been modified across North Carolina. And in essence, what they've done is they've taken the county development regulations and the city development regulations, which were in 2 different sections and somewhat conflicted and somewhat overlapped, and they consolidated them into one unified chapter, and that involved renumbering every land development code. So our ordinance and zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance references specific sections, so we've got to go back and modify that. The changes are mostly technical and procedural in nature and not substantive. It was a commitment to not try to throw anything into the changes from the state statutes that would be controversial. So again, it was just to consolidate, clean things up, make sure there are no conflicts. And that's, in essence, what we're doing with the text amendment. The state did make a big change for some communities, not necessarily for us, but in essence, they've said in order for a local government to enforce zoning, they have to have a reasonably up-to-date comprehensive plan by July 1, 2022. And reasonably up-to-date is anywhere between 5 and 10 years. And as you are aware, in December, we just adopted our plan. And we have consistently in every 7 to 9 years. So that's just a mandate across the state of North Carolina if you're going to have zoning. The deadline for the 160D update to be in the ordinances is July 2021. And we also have cleaned up some conflicts that were in the ordinance, things that didn't seem to make sense. We cleaned it up. I mentioned in here that we tracked the changes. So you received basically this document, double-sided, the zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance, hundreds of pages. And any change that we made, we struck through the language and we added language and we sometimes put notations as to why we made the changes. So it's all there for everybody to see. And at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the town board has. And I'd be remiss to say that our legal staff, Jacob and Emily, really took this project on and then presented the changes to staff. Staff reviewed them, we worked together, and then we also have taken it to the Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board, really been working on this since January, and they ultimately will make a recommendation towards the end of this week, Thursday. So happy to answer any questions.
So these updates also include the revision to the 2040 plan bike plan, those things that we've already adopted that are referenced in this?
So those plans don't change. This is just think of it as those plans set our vision. The zoning ordinances, subdivision ordinances are our tools to achieve the goals in those plans. And so the tools are being modified to comply with the state statutes.
Thank you. Okay. We have one person that's signed up to speak. This will be interesting. Mr. Holman, come on up. Please state your name and address. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Lee Hallman, 100 Cambridge Road in Sherwood Forest. And on that note, before I start, I'd like to thank the town for helping us get the traffic situation straightened out in Sherwood Forest. The elementary school out there was generating a lot of traffic onto Sherwood Drive, and a few people mentioned it to you, and I was out there today, and there might have been a dozen cars in the queue, and they were moving them through pretty quickly, so thanks for that.
So I won't cede your 3 minutes, but since we're all family here, we got them from 3 to 12, so that's a lot.
No, it worked. It worked. Now, I mentioned that to one of the teachers that was out there running the line, so I appreciate that. So, let me start my 3 minutes now. I just got one more revision. I know this isn't the topic, but it's not on topic, but I think we're in the edit mode of that document anyway. So, and I'm speaking today to make a plea to remove references to the rail transit station in downtown. I realize this agenda item is to adjust wording to align with the state, but also know that it'd be well past time to remove this reference. I've spoken to most of you on this topic, as well as Anthony and Jack, and all agree, some reluctantly, there is no rail transit coming to downtown. By leaving the high-density exception for zoning districts within a quarter mile of the non-existent rail station, we are not energizing our downtown. We are inviting developers to come maximize profits by building apartments at the expense of the public. There are 13 places in the zoning ordinance that waives density restrictions based on rail transit. They need to be removed. If high density is your goal for the downtown, then let's put it to a vote. Better yet, refer to the 2040 Community Plan Survey, where livability was the last thing those surveys wanted in downtown. Developers will do what the ordinances allow, train or no train. This exposure saw 134 apartments approved on the southwest corner of downtown, and now another 292 apartments proposed in the northeast quadrant. If this remains, we will likely see the southeast corner go the same way. Promise mixed use, build apartments to maximize profits. With no room left in a quarter-mile radius of downtown, anything that comes in will only be apartments. Please send this text amendment back to the planning board. I know there is support for this revision there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions of staff? All right. We'll close that public hearing. Thank you. We'll get to other business. Does anybody need a break, or you want to just keep moving along? Okay, well, Mr. Roberts, your recommended budget?
Well, we got an hour and 10 to go through this, so hopefully we'll get it done by now.
You said 10?
Promise you I won't talk that long, hopefully 10 minutes. I think Patty's passing out manager's recommended budget books. It's maybe 175 pages or so. What I would tell you if you're listening in the audience is I would spend all my effort and time on probably the manager's message, which is kind of quick highlighted overview. It's probably 6 or 7 pages, and I'd probably focus on CIP. Look at that, 'cause that kind of tells you major projects that are going on in town. If you're bored and you want to go read the other 160, 70 pages, that probably puts you to sleep, but that's where I'd spend all my effort and time. I'm going to hit the highlights. I'm not going to read, like the bottom line and say it's 92,563,579. All of this that you see in front of you, we'll post, and then we'll have the budget books online. So I'm probably going to round these numbers to make it a little bit easier. So what you have before you is this budget, the manager's recommended budget will obviously be balanced, and It will meet the board's adopted financial policies. The total annual fund is roughly $92.5 million. What makes up that is the general fund, which is roughly $57 million. You can see there's an increase from 2021. This is capital driven and also personnel driven. From the enterprise funds, there's two enterprise funds. That is the electric fund and HFFA, and you'll see more details on both of those. The enterprise fund being the electric is $29 million, and the reason for that percentage increase you'll see later on is you're looking at a substation, very heavily capital intensive, and some real reliability issues. HFFA, about $3.6 million. Reason that's down, COVID, memberships, et cetera. And then various special revenue funds that make up the rest of that to give you that $92.5 million. As far as property values, for the first time ever, over $10 billion worth of assessed value. So $10.6 billion of assessed value. Value keeps increasing, even though COVID's been around. We are rocking and rolling, more than 3% highest in the county. As far as the property tax collection, that represents our largest general fund revenue. Tax rate staying at 24%, which it has been the last several years. And what does one penny typically generate? Roughly $1 million. It's 992,000 or something like that, but roughly 1 million. General fund revenue changes. What makes up the general fund revenue? The top three is property tax, sales tax, and utility sales tax. So if there's a big hit or there's something wrong with those, that has a major impact on our budget. We talked about solid waste fees earlier. That's going up. We proposed to increase that by $25 to $109 annually. And as we talked earlier, that's about 51% of that. Stormwater fee, we've talked about at our previous board meeting. I can't remember the exact date, but increases to the stormwater fees, and those changes range from 9 cents to roughly $4 per month. And that's across the whole gamut from residential to commercial. This is all based on the impervious surface that you have. You'll see residential broke down in various categories based on the impervious surface. But we have a lot of stormwater projects that we're working on. Those are typically not the $5 and $10 projects. Those are multi-million-dollar projects that we have in the pipeline now. There's no change to the $20 vehicle fee. I recommend keeping that the same. Back on March 15th, 2021, the board moved forward with 7 non-sworn positions that were added. The other positions that are in this budget that are proposed is a public information officer, 2 planners, a planner 1 and a planner 2, a plan review and engineering, and those, the 2 planners and the plan reviewer are all related to the growth that we had and trying to get projects at the door sooner. Looking to convert 2 part-time positions to full-time, admin assistants, which is the front desk person at Town Hall, and also a parks maintenance position, and then also add 4 public works positions, trying to get our sidewalk rocking and rolling. The sidewalks from an ADA standard, we've got a lot of ADA compliance issues that we have to work on, and then also adding new sidewalk. And these are looked at those in a half year. As far as personnel, what's in the budget from the manager's recommended budget from a pay proposal is funding a COLA at 1%, average 2.5% merit pool. What are the other area agencies around us? You saw that sheet in one of our workshops of what are the other area agencies around us doing is roughly 3.5% average. We're doing something a little bit different for the police, as you can imagine, and as you read in the news what's going on the police frontage. Less people want to be police officers, obviously, for various issues, family-related issues that people just don't want to be police officers anymore. The pool's a lot less to draw from. So what we're looking to do with this manager's recommended budget is pull the sworn positions out of our existing pay ranges, create separate pay ranges, increase their minimum pay for new officers for $46,500, and for sworn positions that are below the midpoint, looking at doing an additional 2% market adjustment to try to get those up to midpoint. As the mayor's probably very aware, because he sits on some of these boards in Raleigh, retirement percentage increase adds just for that 1.25% increase that is occurring as a $200,000 impact to our budget. Excuse me. From operating and debt expenditures, on the fire department side, it's $150,000 increase. That's all related to capital, solid waste, talked about earlier, more homes, the landfill fees, or fuel fees, et cetera. We anticipate that would be an extra $337,000. Power bill spending from sidewalk for the ADA compliance and new sidewalks, increase of $890,000. You're going to start to see the town really push forward on sidewalk connectivities throughout. Planning department downtown study and mobility study. As we get all these plans coming in downtown, we've got to look at what are we going to do from a road infrastructure downtown to also what other areas that, what do we want those to look like to develop. From the debt side of things, there's no new debt service issue or service payments funded in FY22. Total debt service for FY22 is roughly $4.7 million. That's a small decrease. From a general fund departmental capital, we're purchasing 16 police vehicles. From the Parks and Rec side of things, doing several resurfacing projects in the playgrounds that pour in place resurfacing from Berry and Holbrook Parks to North Meck basketball court resurfacing to Bradford Park softball, paved trails, and multiple truck replacements in Park and Rec. And on the pile bill side of things, we're replacing the salt spreader. We're also adding a truck, flatbed truck, and excavator. All this is related to getting the four-man woman crew up on the sidewalk, the new crew. General fund balance, major capital. What you see some of these numbers in here, just to let you know, these are numbers for this fiscal year. Obviously, Farrelltown Parkway, I wish it cost $350,000. It costs a lot more than that. That's why I say look at the CIP. You know, you'll have various dollars in various fiscal years. Town hall design pre-construction is an estimate now. You will see a contract hopefully come back to you for design build on the May 17th meeting. This is a placeholder for what we think design pre-construction will cost. $1.1 million for HAP baseball field lighting replacement. Those lights are 25 to 27 years old. Stumptown Road extension, this project has been in the CIP for some time. Commerce Center Drive is a fairly new project that connects Holbrooks over to Gillett Road. That project is new in the CIP. Farrelltown Parkway, you've seen in the CIP. Land purchase for Fire Station 5 in the CIP. Also, Station 2 is in out years. Park storage and maintenance addition at Siegel. So we're looking to do what I'd say pole barn sheds out at Siegel, as we're obviously losing some of our storage. We're taking on more facilities, also more parks. Church Street to Holbrook Delwood, continuing that project. Gibson Park Drive Phase 2, continuing that project. North Meck Park Greenway is a starting design on that project, is what that's about. From a transportation reserve, I know a lot of folks, you know, don't look where the pots of money come from. That's why I'd say look at the CIP, look at the CIP, tells you about all these projects. Same thing here, various transportation projects, Ranson Road, Siegel to 4th Street. I won't spend time on the dollars because these are multi-year projects. Various projects that have rolled over from previous years. You know, you started design engineering, you roll into right-of-way, then you roll into construction. The audited transportation reserve fund balance as of FY20 was roughly $2.5 million. The $20 vehicle fee generates approximately $940,000 annually. We use these funds to do road projects. Other funds, I'll hit just the highlights of those. Tourism fund revenues obviously have not recovered due to COVID and post-pandemic. We are $100,000 funded to begin design for the restroom parking lot at Berry Park. If you recall, we talked about either looking to expand the existing bathroom or look at building one up top. This is just starting that design phase. Also adding some parking up top. Commerce Station, on that fund, basically we're using those funds to pay the towns, various 3 towns, EDC contribution. Power bill revenues have declined. We're looking to fund additional sidewalk programs, either through the ADA, which we need to do a lot of fixes, and or new sidewalks. Land development we talked about earlier. There's an increase of 9 of the 65 fees there, and as you saw also that we're adding staffing, workload, cross-training, and succession planning, trying to get stuff out the door soon. Electric fund, talked earlier about the electric fund, heavily increased there, is all related to capital. As you can see down below, we're looking at substation, vehicles, and system expansion, all these new homes and development, et cetera. We have to continue to expand that system. We are doing a rate increase based on the actual study, the cost of serve study, and you can see those rate increases in the second bullet point. At residential at 5.75, lighting is more street lights at 20% increase, and medium industrial and large industrial increases. The only decrease is small commercial. And you can see we're using fund balance there in the tune of roughly $3.5 million. HFFA, talked a little bit about that earlier. Obviously, there's been some decreases there, but they're doing a heck of a job keeping that facility open through COVID, and basically actually breaking even, but then generating in the last few months. So from HFA standpoint, the membership revenue is budgeted to decline. Overall budget expected to increase by about 3%. The annual budget is roughly $3.6 million, and there's capital with COVID obviously has come down some because you not generating as much revenue, so capital is down to about $50,000. There's a couple things looking to replace there. No use of tourism funds, and then also they're covering a small amount of debt service. The ARPA funds, you're going to hear a lot about that. You've probably seen a lot about that on the news, in the newspaper, et cetera. We anticipate maybe in the next week or two that we'll know what our first sort of, I'll say just check will be. They're talking about as much as $17 million over 2 different time periods. So the first one could be roughly $8.5 million that we anticipate. There's still guidelines to come out on that. There will definitely be some budget amendments and meetings that the board and staff will have to have on how do we use those funds, what can they be used for, and we'll have to recognize that revenue, and I'm telling you there will be additional budget amendments associated with that. And then the steps moving forward, we'll look to coordinate a calendar for budget workshops if needed, and submit your questions, try to answer those. Budget document, as I said, 175 or so pages. Spend your time on the manager's message in the CIP. This will be posted Wednesday, May 5th. Budget public hearing, May 17th. Hopefully adopt the budget June 7th. That's my hour and 10 minutes.
You sounded very excited about it, I can tell you that.
Well, I mean, all these people stayed.
I wasn't listening. Could you repeat that, please?
Any questions?
No, the only thing I would like to say is that,
Go closer to the mic.
can you hear me? All I want to say is thank you. I know a lot of work went into this. I look forward to reviewing it and looking through it, but I would like to thank all of the staff who worked for hours and hours and hours on making this happen. So thank you.
And I will say, the Brain Trust, Jackie and Patty, all the department heads helped make this a reality.
Commissioner Munger?
Much the same sentiment. I appreciate all the hard work you guys put in on this. Very comprehensive. Look forward to digging into it. I almost anticipate the ARPA funds are going to be a completely separate discussion just because of the timing of everything. So I look forward to hearing a lot more about that. That's it.
Okay, a couple quick questions. The PIO, is that still the thought process only for the town, not for combo? Police and
We've talked to the chief about it, but I know chief is would like to keep PIO and police, but with all the CIP projects we got going on, so to answer your question, PIO, more for town, the chief will continue to do their thing, but with all the projects we got coming out of the ground and new projects on the horizon, the spill, et cetera, there's a lot of things that we could do much better. And that's the reason when I first came here, I think we had a PIO position. We sort of changed that. Didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to. But now that things are finally coming, you're going to start to see dirt churn. We need to get out there in front of this and push out the information. So that's why you see from the manager's recommended budget that we move in this direction.
HFFA, we had some debt roll off. That's why it's gone down 35,000. So doesn't that give us a little more flexibility with the management company? You know, we have to wait until there was something. I mean, we could talk about it later, but if I recall,
There's,
the way we structured
there is still some bonded debt on that building. It is a very small percentage. If memory serves, in the last 2-3 years, the debt service payment on HFFA has been ballpark $250,000, and now it's down in the $35,000 annually range. So it's a very small percentage, and we have to be very careful about what percentage we might incent them. And so it's getting smaller, which is a good thing.
right, good. And then in terms of American Recovery Act funding, are we going to have to set up a separate account? Or is that going to just
we will
get...
definitely have to track it. So whether
Here's my question. So you will, with the town at some point, will receive X amount of dollars. When we go to spend any one of those dollars, is that where we have to come back to for a budget amendment? Or is it going to be more like an enterprise fund where it just kind of flows and goes on its own, so to speak?
I'm aware of no requirement that it be kept in a separate checking account, so I don't think it will be, because we've been asked what our account number is, so I don't think it will require a separate account. But by statute, we couldn't spend money without you budgeting it anyway, so we'll set up a budget ordinance that you'll have to approve that says what we can spend it on.
So if you received $8.5 million, the town receives $8.5 million, and for whatever reason, you can use that money for something that's already in the budget, do you have to have a budget amendment?
If we decide to spend something out of ARPA in grant funds rather than the general fund, and you've already authorized it in the general fund, there's no legal requirement that you change the general fund budget, though perhaps you might want to, so we don't spend more than you intended.
Well, it'll be interesting to see when you get a little more clarity how to structure those things. So, I mean, it could be just, it's not that it's cumbersome, but you're constantly amending your budget. It may not look that great to the general public, but it is what it is. So, okay. Commissioner Bloom?
Mr. Roberts, what was the date of the question that was due back to you on the budget? I saw that last screen and just...
We got all the way up to the date you adopted, so the sooner the better.
I mean, when would you like our questions back to you on the budget? Once we go through this?
How about we'll get together with the team and send you out an email tomorrow, and then sort of set some timelines so that we make sure we're adequately have time to have a meeting if we need to. So we'll send you out an email on that.
Oh my God, if you were asleep, you're awake now.
Is that in the budget?
My recent memory is that we typically don't hold a workshop until after we have our public hearing, because we wait to see what the public has to say about the budget. So we're happy to get your questions as early as you'd like to give them, but ordinarily we don't meet about it to discuss it till after that time.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right.
Actually, yeah, this is kind of unconventional, and I'm going to put Jackie on the spot. So what I've learned doing this is that a lot of regular citizens are paying more attention, and they have a lot more questions. And I think it would be cool if we could maybe do something less intimidating than the budget presentation hearing, because that scares people. I've been that person scared to ask a question, and maybe we could do something like a public meeting that's a little bit more casual, like a coffee chat where people could just drop in and talk with Jackie and ask their questions, because Jackie's a wealth of knowledge. I have friends who are fangirls over her because she explains stuff so much easier. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot like that, but it's something she and I kind of talked about, and I think it might make things a bit easier on people.
I'm happy to chat with people about budget. I get a little passionate and talk fast. Team effort, Patty and I will be happy to chat with folks and coffee chat, whatever we need to do, glad to do it. It's more important to me that people understand what we're adopting than that I impress people with my accounting jargon. Glad to do it.
Well, I think the question there would be where you would do that and what restrictions and so forth, but as restrictions are easing. But certainly emails, if you can't do that.
But sometimes there are older people in this community who don't send emails. There are people who have anxiety disorders. I'm one of them, and I've kind of busted through it sitting up here. But people want to ask questions like, what is a fund balance? What is this? What is that? And Jackie's so easy to sit and talk to, and I've learned a lot from her. I'm sure everyone else up here has learned so much from her, and I'd love to give citizens that opportunity that they understand and have that chance. You know, maybe 2 people show up, but that's 2 people more educated about where the tax dollars are going. And maybe they can just stop by town hall, have some coffee. I don't know, I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like it's a different approach to things.
Maybe you can do a Ring Central call, and then you don't have to worry about where, and if it's convenient, people can do that. Would you think people would be comfortable with that?
With what?
A Ring Central call?
I mean, that's going, but it's just, I'm concerned about older people who may not, like, I've had lunch with somebody the other week who doesn't do any of that. They don't it's kind of hard to teach people how to do stuff like that so quick. I don't know. Just something to talk about, think about before we actually have a vote.
And then any question any citizen has on the budget, just call us, email us on that. As you know, Jackie and I are very open, and Jackie loves this stuff, so she will spend it any way you like it.
And just give me tonight, and I'll be able to answer any question too. So.
I would
Commissioner
just
Beth?
say, I think that it's an excellent idea to do something. I would leave that in Ms. Huffman's court in regards to how she would like to facilitate it if she is game. But I would also want to say that, by law, we have to have that, the public hearing and allow the public to come here officially to speak. But I am encouraged that could be an addition to.
Yeah, it's absolutely an addition to, because there are people who, I know last budget wanted to speak, and then they didn't because they didn't want to come off and feel like they were uneducated. So they just kept I'm just trying to put something out there in the universe where Jackie can shine and do what she does and provide regular citizens the same services we're so lucky to have.
Well, and the fact is that anytime you're able to sit down with one of the experts who can explain it, it makes it easier to understand. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a great opportunity for us to do another outreach as well and help the citizenry get what that budget, what this big packet is, right? And ask all those questions. So I'm in if she's in.
And I'm in too if anybody wants to call me. I can meet with them too. Any other questions on this? All right. The next item, 9B.
Oh.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, since I live on Ranson Road and the project is apparently happening in front of my home, I'd like to ask to be recused and brought back.
I'd like to recuse Ms. Bales.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All those in favor? Okay, seeing a few. Next item is 9B, consider adopting resolution to acquire additional right-of-way and easement for construction on Ranson Road at Stumptown Road. Nobody wants this? Is there a motion?
I can make a motion.
Commissioner Munger?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Motion to approve resolution of the town of Huntersville to acquire right-of-way and easements necessary for the construction of the adopted and funded Ranson Road project.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor? All right.
Motion to bring back Commissioner Bales.
Is that Commissioner Boone? Quietly?
Second?
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Come on back. We missed you. All right, 9C is consider adopting resolution delegating authority to award certain contracts. Ms. Sloop, how are you? Hanging in there?
I'm awake. So you have an updated draft of the resolution delegating authority to town manager within a certain dollar threshold to approve contracts. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Mayor, I got a motion, but I do have a question for the town attorney. What is that threshold of the dollar amount?
It's 300,000 as written.
Okay.
And that wouldn't void any bidding laws or rules. The projects that would qualify for bidding would still have to be bid out. And then there is an exception for anything that is required specifically to be approved by the board, which would include sole source contracts and also piggyback contracts.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution delegating the authority to award contracts of $250,000 as presented in the agenda packet.
250,000?
Yes, sir.
Not 300?
Nope.
Okay. Is there a second to that? Okay, seeing no second, do I have a motion, another motion?
Mr. Mayor, and I'll try the motion that the resolution delegating the authority to award certain contracts as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Question.
Commissioner Munger?
Yeah, Ms. Sloop, thanks for providing the list of all the contracts between $100,000 and $300,000. Can you tell me real quick, all of these that were given to us, did they appear in consent agendas over the period of time that they were, I mean, how were these presented to us? Were they?
It depends on the dollar amount for the contract as to whether or not it would have been presented in a consent or possibly had further discussion. Because they were all contracts from the previous 2 years, I wouldn't be able to speak specifically, but I could ask for more information from finance. And also, we could take a look at some of the previous agendas. But given the dollar threshold that you requested information about between 100,000 and 300,000,
Yeah.
They could have been either on the consent, or if there was a specific bid threshold that needed to be met, they likely wouldn't have been on consent. They would have just been on.
But as long as they didn't have to follow some sort of procedural manner, they would typically be on consent.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. I would like to make a amendment to the motion. I'd like to make an amendment to the dollar amount to move it from 300,000 to 100,000. I can get more specific if needed.
Well, is there
I'll second that.
second? Okay, Commissioner Phillips?
And
Yeah,
if you don't mind,
make the
kind
motion,
of
you
the
make-
reasoning on
you
that,
speak on it.
right now, my understanding, is there a specific threshold right now as it exists?
We don't have a delegation in place right now.
Okay, so it's kind of a big first step for us, and I have absolute faith in Jackie. I have absolute faith in Anthony. I know you'll make very good decisions financially. It's about who's next. The net people that follow you, and making sure that they have the same level of integrity. And just 300,000 is a really big number to me. 100,000 is a relatively big number to me, but it feels like the right first step, and that's why I'm looking at 100,000 as opposed to 300,000.
I mean, I agree. $100,000 is a lot of money, especially when it's not your money. I feel like this is a good way to start the process of being good stewards and having good faith with the community. And then as we grow, we can grow the number.
I'll just make one comment. I did a quick read-through of the spreadsheet that was sent, and it seemed to me most of those were already obligated, approved situations. So those things would have to come back and be voted on again.
Most of them were budgeted items, so you would have addressed those with the budget. As to the change, I would have one question just for clarification. I know that the reason we added the summary section was primarily to address contracts that were in the 100 to 300,000 range. Would we still want the summary of contracts if we lower the threshold to 100,000?
I'd be okay with
You made
not.
the motion.
Sorry.
You made the motion.
I would be okay with removing that requirement for the summary if the number was 100,000.
Okay. Any discussion? So basically what you're voting on right now is pretty much the same language other than $100,000 limit and removing the requirement to send in the summary of contracts. Correct? All right.
So every contract coming in higher than 100,000 has to come to the board for approval, even if it's not approved in the budget.
No, not if it's approved in the budget.
No, it would.
Oh, it would.
I'm
That's what I
saying, to
said.
address your question, that the way that it's currently written are for items that have already been budgeted for. So if it, based on the amended motion, even if it's already been budgeted for, if it's 100,000 or more, it would still have to come before the board.
That was my point, and I went against my point. So,
Is there a
do you
way,
have
is there a way?
question?
Well, I guess the question or my thought process is, can we exempt those that are already approved in the previous budget over that $100,000 threshold? Because I don't want to get into, I mean, could we get into a jeopardy situation, it's approved in the budget CIP, and then we don't approve it, and then it just kills it, something we approved a year ago?
They're actually two separate issues, the budgeted items versus the contract approval. And so this resolution is to address specifically the ability to award and execute a contract. So that's what this delegation specifically addresses. So we would need something clearly set forth regardless of whether or not it had been budgeted. But for an extra layer of comfort, we obviously added in the caveat that they would need to, if they were going to be delegated to Anthony, also be approved in the budget. So that gave you an extra layer of protection for approval.
Yeah, the idea of this whole thing was to simplify, and if you start going down the path potentially that's been mentioned, you're not simplifying. And I didn't study the spreadsheet, but to me, in a quick look at it, and I can't give you a percent, but it seemed like a lot were already budgeted. They were part of road projects or engineering for something and all that. And then, don't forget, they bid it out, many of the others. So, anyway. Commissioner Walsh?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I will not support this. I think the $300,000 number we've discussed, I think it's a reasonable number. If we have a future problem with the town manager, we'll deal with it then.
Any other? All right. All those in favor of the amended motion? All those opposed? All right, so we go back to the original. Any additional comments or questions? All right. All those in favor of the original motion by Commissioner Boone? All those opposed?
Just for clarification, the original motion was for 250,000.
Oh, sorry. No, it wasn't. 300,000.
As noted, as presented.
Nobody, oh, okay, I understand. Nobody seconded that motion. The one that was approved, a motion by Commissioner Boone and seconded by Commissioner Walsh. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay. Thanks for keeping us on that.
Thank you.
All right, final item on our agenda tonight is the 9D, consider approving Rosedale Nature Park, Dog Park rules and regulations.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to make a motion that we defer this till our next meeting on May 17th.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Mr. Jaycox has been here for 2.5 hours waiting.
I know he has. I know he has.
I apologize.
I think this particular item, I don't think that we've had an opportunity to really vet through it, and I think give us 2 weeks and let us circle back.
That's fine.
I'm gonna second the motion if you,
Well,
if you're not.
it's been seconded.
Oh, who's second? I didn't hear that.
Commissioner Phillips.
Okay, thank you.
Any, do you have a
Sorry,
comment?
Michael.
That's
No.
all right.
Sorry, man.
All right, so the May 17th?
Yes.
All those in favor of deferring? Any opposed? No? Sorry. All right. Motion on the consent agenda?
Motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? All right. Any closing comments?
Yes, if you were in attendance at the meeting in public, in person, you left your purse here, you know who you are. You'll have to, I guess, connect with the town or the rec center, but I'm looking at it right now and it's driving me crazy.
Yeah, that's where Miss Caldwell sat.
Okay,
Well, we'll get somebody to take care of that.
okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Any
Well,
other
let's-
closing comments?
Let's make sure we have somebody, let's
Yeah.
designate somebody.
Town manager.
Okay.
I was looking for the police chief, but he's already gone.
He bailed early.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, thank you. See you all on the 17th.